Chapter 444. When Wu Mang's roar ended, everyone present was stunned. A dignified Dan Martial Hall commander couldn't kill a giant spirit realm martial artist with a single palm strike, and he actually wanted to add another palm strike. This was too shameless. The Dan Martial Hall was a martial arts organization of the Alchemist Association. If news of this got out, wouldn't people laugh their heads off? However, Nie Tian was surprisingly calm at this moment. He took a step forward, and 3 tokens appeared in his palm. The Alchemist Association's red-clothed token, the Tang Clan's Inner Court token, and the Alchemist Association's Tier 4 Alchemist badge. When the 3 tokens appeared, everyone present was stunned again. Under normal circumstances, any one of these 3 tokens could save Nie Tian's life. Nie Tian took them out right now, wanting to make a final effort. However, with Jiao Zhengde and Wu Mang's shamelessness, even if these 3 tokens were added together, it probably wouldn't be of much use. And when Jiao Zhengde and Wu Mang saw the 3 tokens in Nie Tian's hand, they were stunned at first, and their faces had a brief moment of surprise. Stinking brat, where did you steal these tokens from? As expected, Jiao Zhengde smiled coldly and directly slandered Nie Tian's tokens as stolen. Nie Tian smiled bitterly. He had long expected this result. However, Wu Mang had a trace of hesitation at this moment, and his gaze couldn't help but look at Jiao Zhengde. The 3 tokens in Nie Tian's hand, any one of them represented an extraordinary meaning. Even if these tokens were really stolen by Nie Tian, before there was proof, he had to treat it as the truth first. Jiao Zhengde smiled coldly and said, "This master is the Alchemist Association's red-clothed elder. I've never heard of a Tier 4 alchemist like you in the Alchemist Association. As for the Tang Clan token in your hand, that's an Inner Court token that only the Tang Clan's Inner Court elders can possess. This master doesn't believe you can obtain it." Master Jiao is right. As soon as Jiao Zhengde's voice sounded, Mo Feng stood up and glanced at Nie Tian with a murderous gaze. He said coldly, "The Tang Clan only has 4 Inner Court elders, and I know every one of them. The token in his hand is the Tang Clan's Inner Court token, and only Inner Court elders can possess it. Even the Tang Clan's lineal descendants can only have an Outer Court token. So, the token in his hand must be fake." Mo Feng was even more ruthless than Jiao Zhengde. He directly said that Nie Tian's identity medallion was fake. After he finished speaking, he looked at Qiu Wuheng and said meaningfully, "Brother Qiu, this old man is right? Obviously, Mo Feng wanted to pull Qiu Wuheng in. If the token in Nie Tian's hand was real, then the Alchemist Guild, Mo Clan, and Qiu Clan would have to bear the Tang Clan's wrath together. At that time, even if someone in the Tang family was unhappy, they wouldn't have to fall out with all 3 families." Of course, Qiu Wuheng understood Mo Feng's meaning. With a sinister smile, he said, "Elder Mo Feng is right. The Tang family's Inner Court token is only given to the Inner Court elders. How could it be given to an outsider? The token in this kid's hand is definitely fake." 7th uncle, his token was given by Tang 13. Suddenly, Qiu Shaokong walked over and whispered to Qiu Wuheng, but he was interrupted by a fierce look from the latter. Qiu Shaokong was at the Dragon Blood Martial meet that day, and he saw with his own eyes that Tang 13 was the one who gave the Inner Sect medallion to Nie Tian, and a few of the Tang family hidden guards were against it. Tang 13 was Tang Hao's favorite grandson. Other direct descendants could only get an Outer Sect token, but it was not strange for Tang 13 to get an Inner Sect token. Qiu Shaokong swallowed his words halfway. He immediately understood that at this moment, regardless of whether the token in Nie Tian's hand was real or fake, he had to treat it as fake, because the 3 major powers here would not allow Nie Tian to live. Nie Tian couldn't help but smile bitterly as he looked at these self-proclaimed big shots spouting nonsense. It turned out that in this world, powerful people could be so bold and confident even when they were shameless. He already knew that it was useless to take out all 3 tokens. But the reason why he did so was to stall for time. If the Tang family, the Battle Cloud sect, or the Qinquan Palace arrived, he would have a chance to live. Unfortunately, none of these powers had arrived. Logically speaking, the Tang family should have arrived by now. They were all from the four major aristocratic families. But how could their efficiency be slower than others? If the Tang family's people arrived, no matter who they were, as long as they saw the intersect token, they would absolutely not let anyone else touch Nietian. Stinking brat, you have nothing to say, right? Diao saw that Nietian didn't say anything and couldn't help but smile coldly. He hurriedly signaled Wu Meng to start. The longer they delayed, the more dreams there would be. If the Tang family's people really arrived, it would be impossible to kill Nietian anymore. Oomph. Nietian smiled in disdain and said, I indeed have nothing to say, but I have nothing to say because of your shamelessness. You have simply refreshed my understanding of shamelessness. Still trying to be eloquent even at death's door. Diao Zhengde smiled faintly and said to Wu Meng, Commander Wu, do it. But at this moment, Wu Meng was a little hesitant. He wasn't afraid of the token in Nietian's hand, but he was afraid of that rank for alchemist badge. If Nietian was really a rank for alchemist, then the crime of killing an alchemist was not small. Even if he was from the Danwu Hall, Meng Fanchen wouldn't let him off easily. Moreover, Nietian was so young. If he was really a rank 4 alchemist, his talent was even more terrifying than Gu Qiulong, one of the 3 monstrous geniuses of Sumi Ling City. Meng Fanchen loved talent the most, especially young monstrous alchemist geniuses. Wu Meng had heard that the relationship between Nietian and the other red-clothed elder, Gu Yi, was pretty good, to the extent that they even addressed each other as brothers. Perhaps the red-clothed token and 4th-tier alchemist badge in his possession were all real. 5th Commander, if you aren't afraid of incurring the wrath of the Alchemist Association and Tang family, then feel free to come and kill me. Nietian shouted with more confidence when he saw Wu Meng hesitating. At a time like this, every second he could drag was every second. Commander Wu, quickly kill him. I will talk to President Meng. You don't have to worry. Diao Zhengde saw Wu Meng hesitating and transmitted his voice anxiously. This master will bear all the consequences. As long as you kill him, I promise to refine 100 rank 6 spirit pills for you. In order to kill Nietian, Diao Zhengde was simply crazy and gave Wu Meng a huge promise. 100 rank 6 spirit pills required Diao Zhengde to refine for half a year without rest. Okay, under the temptation of huge profits, Wu Meng hardened his heart and roared angrily. Stinking brat, impersonating a rank for alchemist and forging the Tang family's intersect token. Today, this commander will execute you on the spot. Killing, and he even had to kill in a dignified and righteous manner. Diao Zhengde and Wu Meng's shamelessness had truly reached the boundary. Wu Meng no longer hesitated. The aura of his entire body gushed out. A ball of essence energy in his palm almost condensed into a substance. A shocking palm smacked out forcefully. This time, Wu Meng used even the essence energy that sucked milk. If he still couldn't kill Nietian, he would really have to find a piece of tofu and smash his head to death. Chapter 445. Everyone felt the aura emanating from Wu Meng's body and retreated with horror. Everyone held their breath at this moment. Their hearts were in their throats, and their eyes were wide open. They did not want to miss a single moment. The terrifying pressure displayed under Wu Meng's palm made everyone feel like their chests were oppressed to the point of discomfort. At this moment, everyone was sure that Nietian could only wait for death, and not even his corpse would be left. However, Nietian did not wait for death. His eyes were cold and firm, and there was not the slightest hint of fear in his eyes. Even the heaven-slash sword appeared in his hand. Oh my God, what is he going to do? Is he going to resist? Great shock and astonishment surged in everyone's hearts. Who would have thought that even under such circumstances, with such a great disparity in strength and with serious injuries, Nietian was still unyielding and wanted to resist to the end? Resist? Of course, Nietian wanted to resist. Not to mention that the person standing in front of him was just a spirit will warrior. Even if it was a peak Heaven Emperor warrior, he would still resist to the end. On the path of martial arts, one must have a firm mind. No matter how powerful and terrifying the enemy was, One must be unyielding and fight to the end. Poof, poof, poof. Just when everyone was in disbelief, countless sword auras suddenly erupted from Yetion's body and directly pierced through his body. Suddenly, his body was like a sieve, and blood spurted out wildly. Use my blood to stimulate my sword intent. Prove my swordsmanship. Unyielding proud sword. AO sword technique. Taboo move. Heaven extinguishing 3 swords first form. Weeping blood soul. An unyielding voice sounded. Yetion stood proudly like a demon that looked down on the world and despised everything. At this moment, he actually burned his own blood to stimulate the uncondensed sword intent to release the taboo move of AO sword technique. Heaven extinguishing 3 swords first form, weeping blood soul. This was a taboo move that Yetion did not dare to use when he was at the peak Heaven Emperor realm in his previous life. At this moment, he was already seriously injured, and he had no choice but to use the taboo move. He did not know what would happen to him if the weeping blood soul fell, and whether he could survive was unknown. Blood chi and sword intent surged, and an endless bloody intent of slaughter appeared in the air. The sword intent enveloped the entire space, and it was suffused with a boundless murderous aura. At this moment, no one knew how to describe the shock in their hearts. The strength that Yetion had displayed had far exceeded their understanding of a giant spirit realm martial practitioner. Yetion knew that even if he didn't die after using this forbidden move, his Yuan's spirit Yuan meridian would inevitably suffer irreparable damage. Moreover, he didn't know if the current heaven extinguishing 1 sword, weeping blood severing soul, could block Wu Mang's palm. The taboo move was indeed heaven-defying, but unfortunately, Yetion's strength was too weak. Just as Yetion was about to release his taboo move, a powerful aura suddenly appeared in his spiritual consciousness and rushed towards him. He's finally here. At this moment, Yetion was so happy that he was about to cry. He immediately retracted his aura. He was not willing to use a forbidden technique unless he was facing certain death. When everyone saw Yetion suddenly retract his aura, they all frowned. Was he waiting for death? At the same time, a figure whistled over from 1,000 meters away. The speed was so fast that it could almost penetrate the air barrier. Boom! In the next moment, a streak of violent blade chi appeared out of nowhere and formed a shield around Yetion's body made of blade intent. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the force of Wu Mang's palm hit the saber intent shield. However, there was only a muffled sound, and then there was no reaction at all. It was hard to imagine that a thin layer of saber intent shield could easily block Wu Mang's all-out palm. Everyone was stunned by the sudden scene, but there were 2 people who immediately reacted. Mo Feng and Qiu Wuhan looked at each other and nodded. They actually attacked at the same time, blasting towards Yetion. These 2 people didn't care who the person who suddenly appeared was. They had already made up their mind to kill Yetion. Boom! Boom! Both of them were spirit wheel realm warriors. The power that suddenly erupted was very shocking. Suddenly, 2 huge waves of air whizzed out, like a dragon from the bottom of the sea, blasting towards Yetion. The saber intent shield could block Wu Mang's attack, but could it block the joint attack of 2 spirit wheel realm warriors? Who dares to touch him? At this moment, an angry roar sounded in midair. Immediately, a saber chi that was as majestic as a mountain rushed out. Boom! The saber chi spread out for 1,000 meters, like a heavenly pillar. It turned into a saber shadow and blocked in front of Yetion, just in time to help him block Mo Feng and Qiu Wuhan's attack. The saber chi swept past, and on the ground, a huge, deep pit appeared. At a glance, it was so deep that the bottom could not be seen. Bang! The next moment, a figure fell from the sky like a boulder falling to the ground, directly setting off a sky full of dust. Everyone was stunned for a long time, not knowing what happened. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. First, Wu Mang's attack was blocked. Then, Mo Feng and Qiu Wuhan's inexplicable attacks were also blocked. The strength of the person who blocked the attack of 3 Spirit Wheel Realm warriors was so terrifying that it made people's hair stand on end. "Who is it?" Wu Meng, Mo Feng, and Xiao Wuhan shouted angrily at the same time, seeing that they were about to kill Nie Tian. But at this moment, there was someone who blocked them. How could they not be angry? Dust filled the sky, and what appeared in front of everyone was actually a tall and sturdy martial artist with iron chains wrapped around his body. The iron chains had actually pierced through his shoulder blades, causing his entire body to emit an even more tyrannical and ruthless aura. Elder Yi, seeing the figure in front of him clearly, Nie Tian's tense nerves immediately relaxed. His face was extremely pale, but it also eased. At the critical moment, the person who killed in time was not someone from the Tang family, the Battle Cloud sect, or Qingquan Palace, but the person Nie Tian met in the Great Chu Heavenly Prison by chance. Frenzied Blade Yi Linyan. "Mr. Nie, are you okay?" Elder Yi didn't care about Wu Meng and the others at all. Seeing that Nie Tian's body was covered in blood and there were actually wounds on his body, his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. He hurriedly stepped forward and injected a strong energy into Nie Tian's body. "I won't die yet." After receiving the energy supply from Frenzied Blade, Nie Tian's complexion immediately improved. With a bitter smile, he nodded and said, "Fortunately, Elder Yi came in time. If you were half an hour late, I'm afraid I would be a corpse." Elder Yi nodded solemnly, indicating that he would take care of the rest. As he took a step forward, Elder Yi's piercingly cold and murderous gaze locked onto Wu Meng, Mo Feng, and Xiao Wuhan. When the latter three noticed the overbearing, killing intent in Elder Yi's gaze, their hearts trembled at the same time while their bodies trembled. This feeling was like a little lamb that was targeted by a ferocious wolf, and it was actually a feeling of despair that was powerless to resist. The three of them looked at each other. They didn't expect that the strength of the person who came would be so strong that he could completely suppress them. At the moment, Elder Yi's strength was at the 3rd tier of the Spirit Wheel, while Wu Meng and the other two were only at the 1st tier of the Spirit Wheel. The Spirit Wheel realm. Each tier was like the world. Even if Elder Yi's strength was suppressed by the demon sealing curse, Wu Meng and the other two were definitely no match for him, even if they worked together. Chapter 446. Wu Meng, Mo Feng, and Xiao Wuhan looked at Elder Yi with deep fear in their eyes, especially the 2 iron chains on Elder Yi's back. They seemed to be some kind of terrifying curse that was suppressing his strength. It was hard to imagine that this person in front of them still had such strength under the suppression of the curse. If the curse was removed, how terrifying would it be? The three of them estimated that Elder Yi's strength was definitely comparable to the inner sect elders of the 4 major clans or the deputy hall masters of the Elixir Martial Hall. The inner sect elders of the 4 major clans and the deputy hall masters of the Elixir Martial Hall were all above the 5th tier of the Divine Wheel. They were all the top figures in the 3,000 small worlds. This person in front of them was very unfamiliar. Where did he come from? They guessed correctly. Elder Yi already had the strength of the 6th tier of the Divine Wheel 40 years ago. Unfortunately, he was hit by the demon sealing curse, and his strength dropped to the 2nd tier of the Divine Wheel. Just yesterday, Elder Yi's strength increased by another tier, reaching the 3rd tier of the Divine Wheel. However, he knew that it wouldn't take long for his strength to return to the 3rd tier of the Divine Wheel. Even though his body was suppressed by the demon sealing curse, Elder Yi still didn't stop cultivating in the past 40 years. Previously, he had an increase in strength, but it was quickly suppressed by the demon sealing curse. In the past 40 years, he lived through this kind of fluctuation in strength. This kind of pain couldn't be understood unless one experienced it personally. To be able to withstand the suppression of the demon sealing curse for 40 years, Yi Linyan's martial will was really strong, and his martial will was perfectly inherited by Qiu Shan. Qiu Shan's vital meridians were destroyed for 25 years, but he still persisted in cultivating. This kind of will wasn't much weaker than his grandfather, Yi Linyan. The path of martial arts was like rowing a boat against the current and climbing the ladder to heaven. Those who could stand at the peak not only had great talent, but also unparalleled perseverance. Elder Yi was hit by the demon sealing curse 40 years ago. If it wasn't for that, his current strength would definitely be at the peak of the 9th tier of the Divine Wheel, or even the Heaven Evolution realm. Whether it was the peak of the 9th tier of the Divine Wheel or the Heaven Evolution realm, they were definitely the peak strength in the 3,000 small worlds. Sir, I am Elder Mo of the Mo clan. Mo Feng saw Elder Ye's face full of anger and fear. He tried to speak, but he was interrupted by Elder Yi before he could finish his sentence. Scram! Elder Yi snorted coldly. He glared at Mo Feng and roared, I don't care who you are. If you dare to take another step forward, you will die. Mo Feng had just opened his mouth when he was directly interrupted by the other party. Moreover, he was even reprimanded. Instantly, his expression turned ugly. However, Elder Ye's strength was too terrifying. Even if he was indignant, he didn't dare to show it. He probed again. This old man admires you. Your strength is outstanding, and you are one of the strongest in the world. But do you know that I'm not a... Once again, Elder Yi sneered. His cold gaze swept across Mo Feng, and he said arrogantly, a mere outer court elder of the Mo clan. Even if Mo Zhaojing were here, I wouldn't be afraid. Hiss. As soon as Elder Ye's words fell, the onlookers gasped. Mo Zhaojing was the name of the head of the Mo family. Tang Hao and Mo Zhaojing were the two men who stood at the peak of the 3,000 lesser worlds. This person didn't even take Mo Zhaojing seriously. Wasn't he too arrogant? Mo Feng's old face was extremely embarrassed. He had never thought that the person in front of him wasn't even afraid of the head of the Mo family. Why would he care about him? An outer court elder of the Mo family. Wu Meng and Qiu Wuhan looked at each other. Their expressions were also extremely embarrassed. Oh, at this moment, a slightly mocking voice rang out. It was Jiao Jingde. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Elder Yi. He actually laughed disdainfully and said, You are only a martial artist in the 3rd tier of the Spirit Wheel. This strength is indeed very strong, but it's a pity that it's not enough for you to look down on the head of the Mo family. Wu Meng and the other two couldn't sense Elder Ye's strength, but Jiao Jingde, a 6th-tier alchemist, had strong mental strength. He could see through Elder Ye's strength at a glance. Jiao Jingde was very cunning. He directly pointed out Elder Ye's strength for Wu Meng and the other two to hear so that they wouldn't have any misgivings. If Wu Meng and the others didn't know Elder Ye's true strength, they would definitely be afraid. Now that they knew that Elder Yi only had the strength of the 3rd tier of the Spirit Wheel, their expressions were much calmer. Humph! Sure enough, as soon as Jiao Jingde's voice fell, Qiu Wuhan stepped forward and said with a cold smile, I thought you were some earth-shattering big shot. It turns out that you're just a martial artist in the 3rd tier of the Spirit Wheel. Do you really think that you are invincible in the world? How dare you look down on the head of the Mo family? Elder Yi frowned slightly. He suddenly stepped out with one foot, and immediately a gust of saber chi whizzed out. Me? Qiu Wuhan shouted. He didn't expect Elder Yi to suddenly attack. He immediately opened the space of the Spirit Wheel to defend himself. Bang! With a muffled sound, the saber chi was abnormally fast and violent. It directly bombarded Qiu Wuhan and sent him flying backward. Puff! Qiu Wuhan's feet drew 2 scratches on the ground that were more than 10 meters long. After he stood up, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Qiu Wuhan clenched his fists tightly. He was furious. Even a mustache at the corner of his mouth twitched. He stared cold at Elder Yi and roared in a hoarse voice. Old dog, how dare you hurt me? Do you know who I am? I'm from the Qiu family. Slap. However, before he could finish his words, what responded to him was a palm condensed by the saber intent, slapping his face. The crisp and harsh sound of the slap fell. Qiu Wuhan widened his small eyes and looked at Elder Yi in disbelief. He was completely dumbfounded. He never thought that someone would dare to slap him, an outer elder of the Qiu family, in public. This was not only a personal humiliation for him, but also a humiliation for the entire Qiu family. The Qiu family was one of the 4 great families, one of the forces that couldn't be provoked the most in the 3,000 small worlds. Who is this person? How dare he ignore the dignity of the four great families? How dare you scold me? Elder Yi sneered and said coldly, even your family head, Chiu Shanfeng, was defeated by me. Who do you think you are? How dare you use the Chiu family's name to suppress me? Can you suppress me? His bold and fearless voice was like a clap of thunder that resounded in everyone's ears and hearts. It was a domineering aura. Chiu Shanfeng was the name of the family head of the Chiu family. Elder Yi opened his mouth twice and directly despised the two family heads of the four great families. The madness of the wild blade was peerlessly domineering. Niet Tian smiled bitterly and said in his heart, Wild Blade Yulinian is indeed worthy of being the madman who challenged all the geniuses of Shumi Lingdu 80 years ago. Just one word, domineering. Chiu Wuhan completely became a withered eggplant this time. He looked at Elder Yi with fear from the bottom of his heart and didn't dare to make a sound. Elder Yi was too domineering. He didn't give anyone any leeway at all. He didn't put the Mo family and the Chiu family in his eyes at all. Chapter 447. What? What do you want to do? Sensing the anger and contempt in Elder Ye's eyes, Wu Meng's forehead was dripping with sweat. His face was pale, and even his voice was trembling slightly. Who would have thought that the dignified Dan Marshall Hall commander would be frightened by a single look? This was the prestige of an expert. Every action could make people who thought they were powerful tremble in fear. Everyone felt the piercing aura from Elder Yi and retreated while discussing in low voices. Who is this person? How can he be so powerful? Yeah, he's simply too arrogant. He doesn't even respect the Mo and Chiu clan's clan heads. He actually said that the Chiu clan's clan head was defeated by him. I wonder if it's true? Looking at his aura, it shouldn't be fake. So a big shot wouldn't lie. Elder Yi ignored the discussions of the crowd. He took a step forward, and his aura suddenly erupted, forcing Wu Meng to retreat continuously. Wu Meng staggered and almost fell down. I dare to guarantee that if you touch me, the Dan Marshall Hall definitely won't let you off. Wu Meng was completely in a mess, and his voice began to tremble. Oomph. Elder Yi smiled coldly, and the mockery on his face intensified. He then laughed loudly and said, Someone like you is worthy of being the Dan Marshall Hall commander? Meng Fanshun and Zhang Tingyin are really blind. Meng Fanshun, president of the Alchemist Association. Zhang Tingyin, hall master of the Dan Marshall Hall. These two represented the highest prestige of the Alchemist Association. However, from Elder Ye's words, he obviously didn't think much of these two. At most, he treated them as people who were on par with him. Audacious. At this moment, Diao Jingde spoke again without any fear. His expression was slightly cold. You actually called President Meng and Hall Master Zhang by their names. Do you know that this is challenging the prestige of the Alchemist Association and the Dan Marshall Hall? Elder Yi suddenly turned around, and his cold eyes locked onto Diao Jingde. He took a step forward, and his surging aura pressured the latter. He said coldly, Are the Alchemist Association and Dan Marshall Hall very scary? Can I challenge them? For people like you to be able to become red-clothed elders and Dan Marshall Hall commanders, this is the biggest joke. The reputation of the Alchemist Guild and the Dan Marshall Hall is ruined in the hands of people like you. Under the pressure of Elder Ye's aura, Diao Jingde's face immediately turned red. He felt an invisible hand tightly choking his neck, making it hard for him to breathe. You dare to kill me? Diao Jingde used all his strength and squeezed the words out of his mouth. You're a red-robed elder of the Alchemist Association. I don't dare to kill you, but I dare to teach you a lesson on behalf of Meng Fanshun. Elder Ye's face was filled with malice. Then a loud slap was heard. Pa, pa, pa. 3 crisp and ear-piercing sounds rang out. Diao Jingde felt that the invisible hand on his neck had disappeared, but one side of his face was burning with pain. The 3 slaps were all on one side of his face, leaving a clear and glaring blood-red handprint on his face. Shame. It was a great humiliation. Diao Jingde simply didn't dare to believe that someone actually dared to slap the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Association in front of everyone. Everyone's gaze landed on Jiao Jingda's face. The clear, blood-red handprint was glaring. No one would have thought that Elder Yi would actually humiliate Jiao Jingda in such a way. The latter was a red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Association. Even the clan heads of the 4 great clans might not dare to do so. Unfortunately, Elder Yi did it without hesitation. These 3 slaps weren't only on Jiao Jingda's face, but also on the Alchemist Association's face. Jiao Jingda was stunned for a few seconds. When he reacted, his face became furious, trembling, and malevolent. When Mo Feng and Qiu Wuhan saw this scene, there was no anger on their faces. Instead, there was a hint of mockery and complacency. They didn't think that Elder Yi would actually slap Jiao Jingda. Doing so would undoubtedly completely offend the Alchemist Association. At this moment, Qiu Wuhan felt that the slap he gave earlier was still considered light. At the very least, he was much luckier than Jiao Jingda. However, Elder Yi didn't have the slightest abnormal reaction. He only swept a glance at Jiao Jingda and said in a cold tone, "Don't think of taking revenge on me. Even if Meng Fanxian and Zhang Tingyin were here, they wouldn't dare to say anything. If it wasn't for them, I would have killed you right now." Elder Ye's tone was stern, revealing the arrogance in his bones. He didn't put the Alchemist Association in his eyes at all. The reason why he didn't kill Jiao Jingda was because of Meng Fanxian and Zhang Tingyin. "Mr. Nye, I can't kill this person. Please don't mind him." With Elder Ye's intelligence, he could already see that among everyone here, the one who wanted to kill Nye Tian the most was Jiao Jingda. However, he couldn't directly kill him on behalf of Nye Tian. After all, Jiao Jingda was a red-robed elder. If he killed him, he wouldn't be able to explain it to Meng Fanxian. When everyone saw that Elder Ye's attitude towards Nye Tian was so calm and even respectful, they couldn't help but be stunned. One after another, they started to guess the relationship between Nye Tian and Elder Yi. Nye Tian didn't care about it. His gaze swept across Jiao Jingda and the others. Without concealing his killing intent, he said indifferently, "Elder Yi, you don't have to take it to heart. I've remembered these people. There's no need to trouble Elder Yi with their lives. Some things must be done by oneself, and some people must be killed by oneself." Nye Tian wouldn't let Jiao Jingda and the others go. Today's matter, he would definitely remember it. Even if Elder Yi really wanted to kill them, Nye Tian would still stop him. On one hand, he didn't want Elder Yi to offend a powerful enemy because of him. On the other hand, he would personally take their lives. "Good." Elder Yi laughed and said, "Take revenge on your own. Mr. Nye is indeed a real man. This Yi admires your pride. Elder Yi, let's leave this place first." Nye Tian was afraid that some big shots would come later. If the inner elders of the 4 great clans came, it would be troublesome. With Elder Ye's current strength, it was too much for him to fight against the inner elders of the 4 great clans. "Don't worry. Although I can't kill them, I will make them pay." Elder Yi smiled indifferently. He turned around and looked at the 4-winged griffin not far away. 2 rays of light shot out from his eyes. The 4-winged griffin in the distance suddenly went berserk. It raised its head and let out a roar. The cultivators who were still sitting on the griffin felt that something was wrong and jumped down. Roar! The 4-winged griffin let out a strange cry. Its huge wings flapped a few times. Then, it shook its head at Elder Yi, showing its obedience. "Beast Tamer." Seeing this scene, Nye Tian exclaimed in his heart. He didn't expect that Elder Yi was actually an extremely rare beast tamer. Taming the rank 5 4-winged griffin in the blink of an eye, Elder Yi was at least a rank 6 beast tamer. Nye Tian saw it clearly. Elder Yi first used saber energy to break the soul imprint on the 4-winged griffin. Then he instantly carved his own soul imprint on it. His method was strange and unimaginable. Then, Elder Yi did the same and tamed the other 2 4-winged griffins in the distance. Chapter 448. After taming the 3 4-winged griffins, Elder Yi did not stay any longer. He leaped up and used saber chi to wrap Nye Tian, Duanmulu, Guwuyo, and Gooden before landing on a four-winged griffin. Under everyone's dumbfounded gaze, the three four-winged griffins soared into the sky and let out a cry. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared. On the ground, the dust raised by the four-winged griffins gradually settled. Diaojingde, Wu Meng, and Mo Feng, Qiu Wuheng, and the others stared blankly in the direction the four-winged griffins disappeared, unable to react for a long time. Only when the three four-winged griffins completely disappeared did they react. Qiu Wuheng was the first to react. Suddenly, he thought of something and his expression changed. He said in horror, "That person just now seemed to call himself the Frenzied Saber." Frenzied Saber? Hearing this name, Mo Feng's expression stiffened. He said in shock, "Could it be the world-defying berserk saber Yi Linyan who challenged all the geniuses of Xumi Lingdu 80 years ago?" Yi Linyan, Diaojingde, and Wu Meng were stunned at the same time. Clearly, they were not unfamiliar with this name. Frenzied Saber, Yi Linyan. This name might be very unfamiliar to the younger generation, but to cultivators over 100 years old, it was a well-known name. 80 years ago, a heaven-defying saber user appeared in the 3,000 small worlds. He once stepped into Xumi Lingdu and challenged all the geniuses. At that time, all the geniuses of Xumi Lingdu were defeated by this person. Even Tang Hao and Mo Zhaojing, who were known as the two great geniuses of Xumi Lingdu, could only fight evenly with this saber user. In the end, this saber user was defeated by another person and disappeared without a trace. In the 3,000 small worlds, there was no trace of the frenzied saber. This saber user was known as the world-defying berserk saber. His real name was Yi Linyan. If he's Yi Linyan, then what he said about Patriarch Qiu being defeated by him isn't a lie. Mo Feng's expression was one of shock. Suppressing his surprise, he gulped and said, "If he's Yi Linyan, then what he said before about Patriarch Qiu being defeated by him isn't a lie." "Yes." Wu Meng nodded and said, "Not only that, even Palace Master Zhang lost to him. 80 years ago, other than Tang Hao and Mo Zhaojing, who could barely compete with Yi Linyan, all the other prodigies were defeated by him. The Qiu clan's patriarch, Qiu Shunfeng, and the Elixir Martial Hall's Hall Master, Zhang Tingyin, were all defeated by Yi Linyan. No wonder this person is so arrogant. It's actually the world-defying wild saber from 80 years ago." Qiu Wuheng touched his still-hot face, and his expression became even more fearful. "I don't care who he is. Even if he really is a world-defying wild blade, humiliating a red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild will still result in his death." Diaojingde was actually the calmest among them. With a sinister expression, he said in his heart, "Yi Linyan, even if the Alchemist Guild doesn't kill you, the people from the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion will definitely kill you." Once again, Diaojingde wanted to invite the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion to kill Yi Linyan. With Yi Linyan's strength, they would have to hire at least a purple gold rank or even a diamond rank assassin from the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion to kill him. Could Diaojingde invite him? What relationship does he have with the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion? After a long time, the crowd slowly dispersed. Not long after, there would be crazy news that the world-defying wild blade Yi Linyan, who suddenly disappeared 80 years ago, had once again appeared. And just when the crowd had all left, in a dark corner, two figures quietly appeared like lurking ghosts. These two figures were like ghosts. There was not the slightest aura of a martial artist on them. They did not even have the slightest aura of a living person. They were like two moving corpses. The metal chain on that person's body, is it the death god's metal chain? One of them opened his mouth. There was no emotion in his tone, and it was a very mechanical voice. "He is the person that the city lord is looking for." The other nodded. The two of them exchanged glances and immediately disappeared into the darkness. These two people were from Chaos City, and the city lord they were talking about was the city lord of Chaos City. However, Chaos City had always been managed by the Vice City Lord. The real city lord had always been a mystery and had never appeared before. Whoosh! Above their heads, the wind was fierce, whistling past. Nyetian and the rest sat on the four-winged griffins. The wind was so strong that it could almost pierce through their eardrums. The other two four-winged griffins followed closely on both sides, as if they were escorting the group. Mistinya, why don't you introduce your friends to me? Although Elder Yi was very strong, under normal circumstances, he was very amiable and did not put on any airs. Duan Mulu and the rest introduced themselves. Senior strength is really too strong. This junior admires you. Godan chuckled and said. Elder Yi did not have much of a reaction. He only nodded his head and smiled. There was a hint of bitterness in his smile. Elder Yi dealt with the Alchemist Guild, the Mo family, and the Chiu family in a domineering manner. The aura and strength that he displayed made people deeply impressed. However, Niet Tian understood a principle, and that was not to be envious of the prestige of the strong. Behind the prestige, no one knew how much the strong had to pay for it. Since ancient times, those who were able to become unparalleled experts had put in the most arduous effort. They had the exploration of an eagle, the focus of a poisonous snake, the hard work of an ant, and the patience of a silkworm. After putting in so much effort, they could finally stand in front of the world as strong experts. Especially Elder Yi. He had put in more effort than ordinary people. However, what he received was far less than what he had put in. 40 years ago, he was already at the 6th tier of the Divine Wheel. Now, he was only at the 3rd tier of the Divine Wheel. Moreover, he had to endure the torture of the demon's sealing curse at all times. This kind of pain was not something that ordinary people could imagine. Brother Godan, do you know who Elder Yi is? Niet Tian smiled faintly and asked with a strange expression. Godan and the rest shook their heads. They really did not know the identity of Elder Yi. However, Elder Yi's performance just now was too shocking and domineering. Elder Yi is the world-defying wild blade who single-handedly challenged the geniuses of Sumi Ling City 80 years ago. Niet Tian gave a simple explanation, and it was very vivid. Godan and the rest were stunned and said, Elder Yi, how did it feel to fight with Lord Tang Hao? Was it very satisfying? Tang Hao, Mo Zhao Jing, and the rest were all legends of the 3,000 small worlds. It was too terrifying for Elder Yi to be able to fight with these people and not be defeated. Let's not talk about the past. Elder Yi shook his head slightly. His expression was somewhat solemn. He was not very interested in talking about the heroic history of the past. Niet Tian saw that Elder Yi did not look too good. He frowned and asked, Elder Yi, did you get those 2 medicinal ingredients? Elder Yi escaped from the great Chu heavenly prison and went to the Alchemist Guild of Sumi Ling City to get the 1,000-eye soul leaf and the fire lotus fruit. Chapter 449. Elder Yi sighed and smiled bitterly. I didn't get it. Looks like I have to look for it myself. Niet Tian frowned slightly and asked, does the Alchemist Guild not have Ice Soul 1,000 Leaves and Fire Lotus Fruit? Ice Soul 1,000 Leaves and Fire Lotus Fruit were both 6th-grade herbs and were very rare. But with the Alchemist Guild's background, it wasn't hard to take them out. Could it be that Elder Yi and Meng Fanshun weren't close enough and the latter wasn't willing to give the herbs to Elder Yi? Elder Yi smiled faintly and said, my luck isn't good. Meng Fanshun, that old thing, is in closed-door training and isn't at the Alchemist Guild. I don't know anyone else and don't want to trouble them. I'll just look for the herbs myself. It turned out that Elder Yi's trip was in vain. The president of the Alchemist Guild, Meng Fanshun, was in closed-door training. Niet Tian nodded and suddenly thought of something. He looked at Elder Yi thoughtfully and said, the chaotic abyss has opened. Elder Yi, are you interested in going with us? Since it's an ancient ruin, there should be a lot of herbs there. Even if we don't have Ice Soul 1,000 Leaves and Fire Lotus Fruit, there should be something that can replace them. The most important part of the demon's sealing curse was to use herbs with both fire and ice attributes. It wasn't necessary to use Ice Soul 1,000 Leaves and Fire Lotus Fruit. Duan Mulu and the rest's eyes lit up. They were obviously looking forward to it. Their team was too weak. Compared to the teams from the other aristocratic families and forces, they would be killed in seconds. Now that Niet Tian had a falling out with the 3 forces, if they met these people in the chaotic abyss, they would be killed in an instant. However, if they had Old Man Yi as their leader, their team would be quite powerful. All right, Elder Yi agreed readily. I also want to see how terrifying the legendary chaotic abyss is. Nye Tian nodded heavily, unable to hide his excitement. With Elder Ye's participation, Nye Tian was very confident about the trip to the chaotic abyss. After a while, the four-winged griffin arrived at the edge of Chaos City and landed in a forest. Everyone came down. Go! Elder Yi erased the soul imprint he had placed on the four-winged griffins and released them back into the forest. Roar! 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 After erasing the soul mark of the warrior, the three-headed lion vulture immediately recovered some of its berserk nature. It let out a strange roar and actually wanted to attack Elder Yi. Elder Yi's entire body released a horrifying saber intent. The three-headed griffin sensed danger and cried out strangely again. Then, it soared into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. You're letting him go just like that? Gooden was stunned by Elder Yi's actions. These were 3 fifth-rank spirit beasts. Even if they were to be sold, it would still be a huge fortune. Elder Yi smiled faintly and looked at the deep forest in front of him. He said profoundly, they should not have come to the world of cultivators in the first place. If we let them go now, I wonder how many of them will survive. That's right. Nye Tian nodded and sighed softly. Although the four-winged griffins were fifth-rank spirit beasts, they had been used as mounts by warriors for too long, so they did not have the ruthlessness of spirit beasts. Their true battle strength was probably only a little stronger than a fourth-rank spirit beast. If they were released into the forest now, it would be good if 1 out of 3 of them could survive. This is the number 1 mountain range in the 3,000 small worlds, right? Nye Tian asked as he looked at the continuous mountain range in the distance. Yes. Elder Yi nodded and said, the Hung Duan Mountain is the number 1 mountain range in the 3,000 small worlds. It is rumored that there are 7th-rank spirit beasts and even 8th-rank spirit beasts in it. So, until now, no one dared to enter the depths of the Hung Duan Mountain. Even if there were warriors who entered occasionally, they could only enter and never come out. So, the Hung Duan Mountain is the most dangerous place in the 3,000 small worlds. The Hung Duan Mountain. Nye Tian looked at the mountain range in the distance that went straight to the sky. His eyes were filled with endless yearning. All right, Mr. Nye, let's go to Chaos City first. Elder Yi said and turned to leave. After they left, they entered through another gate of Chaos City. In the next 10 days, Chaos City was very peaceful. Although there were a lot of forces entering the city, they didn't cause any big commotion. Everyone was waiting for Chaos City to announce the quota for entering the chaotic abyss. The commotion in the chaotic abyss this time was too big. Almost everyone knew about it. If everyone was allowed to enter the chaotic abyss, there would be too many people. So, Chaos City would definitely conduct a screening. 10 days later, a notice was posted in the center of Chaos City's martial arts field. All warriors who wanted to enter the chaotic abyss had to compete for the quota. This time, the number of teams allowed to enter the chaotic abyss was limited to 40, and each team could have a maximum of 10 people. The 4 great families, the Alchemist Guild, the Battle Cloud sect, and other top forces directly obtained the quota. Among the 40 teams, only 28 were left for other warriors and forces to compete for. 2 days later, the quota for entering the chaotic abyss was held in the martial arts field. Tens of thousands of warriors gathered in the martial arts field. Their eyes were fixed on the top of the 28 stone pillars in the center of the martial arts field. On top of the pillars was a token, which was the Abyss token for entering the chaotic abyss. Every warrior could only snatch 1 Abyss token, and 1 Abyss token could bring up to 10 warriors into the chaotic abyss. Nye Tian, Elder Yi, and the others were among these tens of thousands of warriors. After 12 days, Nye Tian's complexion had already returned to normal. His strength had also increased by 1 level, reaching the 4th level of the Giant Spirit level. He also had 4 rank 3 Star Souls on the Star Soul Steel. His current state was very good. However, the matter of snatching the Abyss token would still be completed by Elder Yi. The warriors in the martial arts field had varying strengths. Tion estimated that there were thousands of warriors above the 5th level of True Essence Realm, and only a few dozen warriors around the 9th level of True Essence Realm. However, there were not many Spirit Wheel Realm warriors. After all, there were only about 100 Spirit Wheel Realm warriors in the entire 3,000 small worlds. Of course, this was only on the surface. As for how many Spirit Wheel Realm warriors there were in the Dark Forces, no one knew. At this time, those who dared to snatch the Abyss token had to be at least at the 7th level of True Essence Realm. If others tried to snatch it, they would only be cannon fodder. Buzz! At this time, a clear and intense bell suddenly rang in the martial arts field. This was the signal for the snatching of the Abyss token to begin. Snatch it! The Abyss token is mine. No one snatches it from me. I will kill whoever tries to snatch it. They're only at the 9th level of True Essence Realm. Can you kill them? In an instant, the entire martial arts field exploded. Countless roars resounded. Countless figures rose from the ground and flew towards the 28 stone pillars in the center of the martial arts field. Elder Yi, it's up to you. Tion smiled faintly. He was very confident in Elder Yi. With Elder Yi's strength, he dare not say that he was the strongest among these tens of thousands of warriors, but he should at least be in the top 3. It was naturally not a problem for him to snatch one of the 28 Abyss tokens. Good. Elder Yi roared. Voila! The Death God Iron Chain behind him made a crisp sound. His entire body was like an abyss-breaking dragon. He flew out violently and shot toward the stone pillar. Chapter 450. Among the hundreds of cultivators, Elder Yi was like a tiger pouncing on a flock of sheep. Although there were high-level true energy realm masters around him, they were like weeds in front of him, completely unstoppable. What a powerful aura! Get out of the way! Someone exclaimed with a shocked expression. Wherever Elder Yi went, he was like a dragon breaking the surface of the water. The people around him quickly avoided him, not daring to get within 100 meters of him. In the blink of an eye, Elder Yi appeared on the stone pillar and easily obtained an Abyss token. This kind of snatching method was originally a game for the strong. Whoever was stronger would be able to obtain the token. Got it. Seeing that Elder Yi had obtained the Abyss token, Gooden couldn't help but be excited. Duanmu Lu and Gu Wuyo also had pleasant surprise on their faces. Only Tion's expression was calm. It was normal for Elder Yi to obtain the Abyss token. It would be strange if he didn't. Don't snatch my token. It's mine. If you come any closer, I'll kill you. Kill your sister. Without strength, entering the chaotic abyss will only result in death. Give me the token as soon as possible, lest you lose your life. At this time, the cultivators in the air had already begun to fight for the Abyss token, even putting their lives on the line. For a time, a variety of dazzling martial skills filled the sky, but with the fiercest murderous intent, they attacked in all directions. This was simply a big melee, and the people who attacked were all above the True Energy Realm 5th level. The impact was indescribable. Tion was glad that he didn't follow Elder Yi to fish in troubled waters. Otherwise, even with Elder Yi's protection, it would be difficult to guarantee that he would come out unscathed. After obtaining the Abyss token, Elder Yi directly rushed out of the air battlefield and arrived behind Tion and the others, preparing to leave. With the Abyss token in hand, the next step was to wait for the chaotic abyss to open tomorrow. However, at this time, Tion's eyes were fixed on two familiar figures in the sky. One was the Spirit Array Master Yao Feek, and the other was the Great Chu Imperial Advisor Tawny. Although the Great Chu Empire was strong, it was still far from enough to directly obtain the Abyss token like the 4 great clans and other forces. That was why both Yao Feek and Tawny wanted to snatch the Abyss token. Both of them were in the True Element Stage 9. They were considered the strongest among the crowd. Yao Fei, on the other hand, had a rank 5 spiritual array protecting him, so he ignored everyone's attacks and flew toward the stone pillar, easily obtaining the Abyss token. Tawny, on the other hand, was fighting fiercely. She was holding a sword that was condensed from water droplets. It looked very strange. Courting death. At this time, Tawny already had an Abyss command in her hand, But when a martial artist rushed over to snatch it, she gave a tender shout and stabbed out with the water sword in her hand. A sharp sword light flashed, and that martial artist screamed pitifully as he died. Seeing this scene, Nyetian couldn't help but frown. He didn't expect that the water sword in Tawny's hand would be so terrifying, easily killing a true element stage 7 martial artist. Moreover, this woman was really ruthless. When she attacked just now, her expression was as calm as water, and there was no hesitation in her eyes. One look, and one could tell that she was someone who would kill without batting an eye. "Mr. Nya, let's go." Elder Yi didn't want to waste time here, so he said. Nyetian nodded his head, and the few of them immediately left. When they arrived at the inn, they all had relaxed expressions on their faces. Haha, this time, it's all thanks to Elder Yi. Otherwise, we really wouldn't have been able to enter the chaotic abyss. Gooden smiled mischievously, looking at Elder Yi with eyes full of worship. Elder Yi glanced at Nyetian and said, "I know, even without me, Mr. Nya would definitely have a way to enter the chaotic abyss." Elder Yi is overpraising me. Nyetian faintly smiled and didn't deny it. If not for Elder Yi, Nyetian would also be able to enter the chaotic abyss, but he would have to ask for help. With his strength, if he wanted to snatch the abyss token, even if he could snatch it, he would probably have to pay a price. An abyss token allowed a team of 10 to enter the chaotic abyss. If Nyetian didn't snatch the abyss token, he could look for people from the Tang family or people from the Battle Cloud sect to enter the chaotic abyss. Although Nyetian wasn't familiar with the Battle Cloud sect, he knew that Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu were already good friends. Zhang Xiaoyi even gave Duanmu Lu a Battle Cloud sect token. Some people, even if they didn't know each other well, could become bosom friends even if they only met once. For example, Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu. But some people, even if they knew each other for a lifetime, would still become enemies in the end. For example, Elder Yi and his good brother, who gave him the Death God chain. One day later, everyone once again gathered at the training field in the center of Chaos City. At this time, the 40 teams that entered the chaotic abyss had all appeared. Each team had at most 10 people, and with 40 teams added together, there were less than 400 people. Everyone was waiting anxiously, waiting for the people from Chaos City to appear. No one knew the specific opening location of the chaotic abyss. Only the people from Chaos City knew. If they wanted to enter the chaotic abyss, they had to be led by Chaos City. After a moment, a figure appeared in the distant sky. In the blink of an eye, she appeared in front of everyone. Everyone looked at the figure standing in the sky and couldn't help but stare blankly. This was a woman of unparalleled beauty. She had a beautiful appearance and a proud demeanor. Her entire body emitted a noble aura, but she had a calm smile on her face. Her spirited eyes seemed to be staring at every single person present. Nyetian looked at the figure in the sky. Just looking at her made his heart tremble, and his mind went blank. He felt everything around him disappear, and he was actually in another space and time. In front of him was an abyss that couldn't be looked at. Just looking at it made people feel despair. "Master!" Just as Nyetian was about to sink into the abyss, Corpse Demon Lord's voice rang in his mind, which made him wake up in an instant. Nyetian woke up with a start, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He was surprised. This woman is so strong, and she is at least a rank 5 illusionist. With just a look, she actually made Nyetian fall into her illusion. It's really terrifying. "Master, this woman is an illusionist. You must be careful." Corpse Demon Lord's voice sounded again, and it actually had a slight tremble. Nyetian knew that Corpse Demon Lord himself was a powerful illusionist. The woman in front of him could actually make him feel nervous. Her attainments in illusions were really terrifying. Nyetian glanced at the people around him. Except for a few Spirit Wheel Realm warriors, everyone else's eyes were dull and empty. Obviously, they had fallen into an illusion. This woman is so scary. She actually made so many people fall into an illusion at the same time. Nyetian was surprised. He couldn't help but look at the woman with a touch of fear. Illusionists were rare, and those who could use illusions to such a level were even rarer. Chapter 451. The Deputy City Lord of Chaos City, Wan Qirong, gave a captivating smile. Her voice seemed to have a magical power, as if she wasn't talking in the air far away from you, but whispering in your ears. This feeling was very real, and it made people have an evil impulse. Nie Tian looked at Wan Qirong again, and he became more cautious. He didn't expect that the Deputy City Lord of Chaos City was actually a woman, and she was such a gorgeous woman, and her strength was so terrifying that it made people shudder. At this moment, everyone woke up. Many people lowered their heads and didn't dare to look at Wan Qirong directly. At a certain moment, Wan Qirong's gaze swept past Nie Tian again, and she seemed to be a little surprised. All the other experts below the spirit wheel state had fallen into her illusion, but why didn't this guy seem to be affected? She definitely wouldn't have guessed that there was an illusionist in Nie Tian's soul space. No matter what, Corpse Demon King was an illusionist who created the land of blood massacre. Even if his strength had deteriorated to a pitiful state, it was still very easy for him to see through her illusion. Nie Tian was also in deep thought. No wonder the City Lord of Chaos City never appeared. With such a powerful Deputy City Lord in charge, no forces dared to look down on Chaos City. It's her. This is impossible. At this moment, Elder Yi, who was standing beside Nie Tian, had a strange expression on his face. His eyes were filled with doubt, confusion, and even anger. Elder Yi, do you know her? Nie Tian asked Elder Yi through telepathy. From Wan Qirong's reaction, she didn't seem to know Elder Yi, and the latter's reaction to her was a little too big. An old friend, maybe I saw her wrongly. Elder Yi replied with telepathy, and then there was no more reply. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome from afar. Wan Qirong spoke again. Her voice was soft and gentle, like a gentle breeze caressing one's cheeks, causing one to feel intoxicated to the point of falling asleep. She continued, the opening of the abyss of chaos this time is the largest in history. Everyone knows that the chaotic abyss is an ancient ruin. No one knows what is inside, but everyone wants to know. However, it's impossible for everyone to enter the chaotic abyss, so we can only use the abyss order to limit the number of people who can enter. Those who can't enter can only regret it. Just wait patiently for the next opening of the abyss. Wan Qirong had a faint smile on the corner of her mouth. Even if it was a refusal, it would still make people feel fascinated. She was a very charming woman. Every frown, every smile, and every movement of hers was extremely alluring. Among all the women Nie Tian had met, only Aokiki Lily could compare to her. Those who didn't have the qualifications to enter the chaotic abyss were still feeling indignant, but now they were beaming with joy. Wan Qirong's charm was evident. Following that, Wan Qirong didn't waste any more words. She led the 40 teams and left the arena. Moments later, Nie Tian and the others came to a deep tunnel. At this time, there weren't many people around, only about 300. Nie Tian saw many familiar faces. Tang 13, Zhang Xiaoi, Aokiki Lily, Ding Yifan, and a few others were all in the crowd. Nie Tian wasn't in a hurry to greet them. Once they entered the abyss, there would be plenty of time to catch up. Ladies and gentlemen, please follow me. Wan Qirong walked to the front of the group. Observing this woman at such a close distance, her charm was even stronger. However, Nie Tian's attention wasn't on Wan Qirong at this time. Instead, he was constantly sizing up the 40 teams. When the chaotic abyss opened, the major forces of the 3,000 small worlds had sent out their experts. Apart from the experts who led the teams, the rest were all young geniuses. When these people met each other, no one was willing to submit to the other. It was bound to be a magnificent collision. Among the 40 teams, apart from the 4 big families, the Alchemist Guild, the Martial Gathering Merchant Union, the Battle Cloud Sect, and some other super forces led by Spirit Wheel Realm warriors, the other forces were led by True Element Level 9 warriors. This made Nie Tian feel slightly relieved. If there were any treasures in the chaotic abyss, Elder Yi would definitely be able to snatch them easily. So far, Nie Tian hadn't found anyone stronger than Elder Yi. After passing through the deep tunnel, the crowd was in front of a slightly wider open space. On the other side of the open space was a 10,000 feet cliff. Nietian immediately came to a realization. The tunnel they came from should be a cave, and this cave was connected to the cliff on the other side. Everyone, please look. That is the entrance to the chaotic abyss. Wan Qirong walked to the edge of the cliff and pointed at something that looked like a thick cloud in the air. Everyone followed and looked at the sky. In the sky, there was a dark crack like the squinting eyes of a huge beast or like a 10,000 feet high valley. Not far away from the pitch-black crack, 4 stunning figures stood in mid-air, guarding the crack. Among the 4 figures, there was one that was very familiar. When Nietian saw her face clearly, his face couldn't help but stiffen for a moment. He shouted out her name, Rui Qinyu. That's right, Rui Qinyu was actually among the 4 figures, and she was wearing the same clothes as the others. She joined Chaos City? Nietian immediately understood, and his brow furrowed. In order to take revenge, Rui Qinyu actually joined Chaos City. Teacher. At this moment, the 4 figures floated over and bowed to Wan Qirong. Teacher. Nietian's face darkened again when he heard this form of address. Not only did Rui Qinyu join Chaos City, but she also became the Deputy City Lord Wan Qirong's disciple. Of course, Rui Qinyu discovered Nietian's existence. Her cold eyes only glanced at him, and there was no ripple at all. Nietian felt a sharp pain in his heart. He had seen too many people who were blinded by hatred. Rui Qinyu did not hesitate to join an organization like Chaos City for revenge, but was it really useful? Would Chaos City offend the land of bloody massacre or the Heaven Burial Society for one person? Nietian took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed the emotions in his heart. How's the Chaos Abyss? Wan Qirong asked with a faint smile. Teacher, the abyss has been opened to the maximum. The crack will start to close in another half a month, and it will completely close within a month. One of the female disciples replied respectfully. Wan Qirong nodded and turned to the people behind her. Everyone, you have all heard it. The Chaos Abyss can only last for a month. After entering, no matter what happens, you must come out within a month. What will happen if you can't come out? Someone asked. Wan Qirong's lips curled up slightly, and she said with a smile, If you can't come out, you will be trapped in the abyss forever. Hearing Wan Qirong's answer, everyone was terrified. Being trapped in the Chaos Abyss was a dead end. Chapter 452. Wan Qirong didn't waste any more time and said, Everyone, please. Although everyone wanted to enter the chaotic abyss, when the time came, no one dared to be the first to step out. The chaotic abyss was a great temptation, but it was also a great danger. Who knew what was inside? Nietian glanced at Rui Qinyu. The latter also looked at him without any expression and didn't say anything. Nietian nodded and said to Elder Yi behind him, Elder Yi, let's go. Okay. Elder Yi was also a madman of his generation. At this moment, he didn't have the slightest bit of fear. Instead, he was unusually excited. Elder Yi released his saber intent, forming a saber intent shield that wrapped around Nietian and the others. Immediately after, they soared into the sky. The 5 of them directly flew towards the abyssal chasm. Someone is going, the crowd exclaimed. When Wu Mang, Mo Feng, Qiu Wuhan, and the others saw that it was Elder Yi and Nietian, their faces revealed a sinister expression. They couldn't wait for something to happen to them. Nietian. When Tang 13 saw Nietian's figure, the corner of her mouth rose into a smile. She knew that when the chaotic abyss opened, Nietian would definitely come to join in the fun. Aoki Lily, Ding Yifan, and the others also saw Nietian's figure and were all surprised. Under everyone's gaze, Nietian's group got closer and closer to the abyssal chasm. When they were about 10 meters away from the chasm, suddenly, a dazzling white light shot out and wrapped around them. Immediately after, a huge force appeared. Nietian felt as if he had fallen into a space-time vortex. The feeling of powerlessness made him unable to resist. The dazzling white light disappeared. When Nietian opened his eyes again, what appeared in front of him wasn't a vast expanse of time. Instead, it was a huge cliff whose edge couldn't be seen. At this moment, They seemed to be in a strange space-time. There was only this cliff in front of them and nothing else. Teacher, this. Duanmu didn't understand what was going on in front of him. Nietian took out the true extreme crystal and probed it with his divine sense. Nothing in the surroundings had changed, which meant that this wasn't an illusion. Elder Yi, let's go up the cliff. Nietian looked at the cliff in front of him. There was no other way. Elder Yi answered and led a few people up the cliff. After a while, Nietian felt a strong wind blowing past him, but the cliff in front of him did not change at all. Everything was too strange. Nietian felt as if the cliff was alive. As they rose, the cliff rose with them. But reason told him that it was impossible. There were no living cliffs, and no one could make cliffs move up and down in a straight line. Nietian, can you guys hold on? Elder Yi increased the protection of the saber intense shield and continued to rise. They had already entered the chaotic abyss. How could they give up just because of cliff? Elder Yi increased his speed of ascension. The strong wind in the sky was like a steel knife hitting his face. After an unknown period of time, Nietian faintly felt that the direction of the cliff seemed to be slowly changing. It was originally vertical, but now it was horizontal. At this moment, Nietian and the others had risen at least tens of thousands of meters. This cliff was really ridiculously high. Under the pressure of the strong wind, Duanmu and Guwuyo were drowsy and couldn't hold on any longer. Hold on, I have a feeling that we are almost there. Nietian was slightly excited and shouted loudly. Elder Yi didn't say anything and continued to rise along the cliff. Gradually, the cliff completely changed from vertical to horizontal and began to extend in all directions. What is that? At this moment, Nietian saw a dazzling light suddenly appear a few hundred meters in front of him. It was like a sea of light, almost blinding them. The light flowed, dazzling and unusually dazzling. From afar, it gave people a mysterious and illusory feeling. And at this moment, the fierce astral winds around him had disappeared without him noticing. Elder Yi didn't remove the sword-intent shield. He was afraid that unexpected danger would appear. The few of them were excited and walked forward. This is... Quickly walking to the place where the sea of light was, Nietian was completely stunned by the scene in front of him. His expression was a little sluggish. Elder Yi and the others had the same reaction as Nietian. They looked at the scene in front of them, dumbfounded. The scene in front of them was like a dream, giving people a feeling that it was illusory. The light connected to form an illusory sea. Being in it, they felt like they had forgotten themselves. They were in a completely relaxed state, giving people an indescribable feeling of comfort and joy. This wasn't an illusion, but a real world. Nietian faintly felt that the scene in front of him might be the original scene when the world was created. There was nothing but endless light. In such a wonderful environment, one would feel endless joy. It was as if all troubles could be thrown away. Compared with the world behind him, the world in front of him was a completely different world. There was no pressure, no restrictions. His whole body and soul were free. How is this possible? After an unknown period of time, Nietian finally calmed down. The first thing he said was still the same doubt. Elder Yi and the others were still in a state of obsession, because such a world was even more illusory than a dream. Nietian didn't care about them. He walked forward and wanted to reach out to touch the sea of light. However, he was blocked by a strange force. It's a restriction. Nietian immediately realized that there was a restriction protecting this sea of light. He sensed the strength of the restriction. It wasn't very strong. With his strength, although he couldn't completely break it, he could easily make a crack. At this time, the others also arrived. Looking at the scene in front of them, they all exclaimed, "Wow, what is this place? Damn, I'm not dreaming, am I? So beautiful. How can there be such a beautiful place in the world?" Nietian looked back at the people behind him. Half of them were gone. It seemed that just that cliff alone made many people give up on the chaotic abyss. As more and more people arrived, the sea of light in front of them gradually disappeared. Nietian frowned slightly, as if he thought of something. The corners of his mouth curled up, but there was some regret on his face. Nietion guessed that the world in front of him should be some kind of projection at the beginning of the world's creation, or a projection of another world. Like a mirage, it was preserved by some mysterious force. When the crowd arrived, the noise and the invisible aura emitted by the cultivators dispersed the sea of light mirage. Such a beautiful scene could only be seen once in a lifetime, and one would have no regrets. Seeing the sea of light mirage disappear, the crowd felt regret. Nietion no longer hesitated. He directly opened a crack on the restriction, just enough for one person to enter. He didn't stand on ceremony and was the first to enter. The next step was to enter the chaotic abyss. Chapter 453. Nietion couldn't help but frown as he exclaimed in a low voice, "So comfortable." The sudden, comfortable feeling made Nietion's eyebrows furrow. What is this place? It's too magical. Nietion stared at the scene in front of him in shock. In front of him was a majestic square platform. The platform was hundreds of meters high, and there were steps on all four sides. Moreover, each step was very high, at least 2 to 3 meters high. Looking closely, on each step, there were 2 black dragons that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws as if they were about to fight. What was even more strange was that the entire platform was shrouded by a colorful cyclone. It was like a ripple of water that enveloped the heaven and earth. The 4 steps were huge, but the platform in the center was very small. From afar, it was only a few dozen meters wide. Nietion could see that in the center of the Tao platform was a stone pillar that was 5 or 6 meters thick and carved with dragons. Above the pillar was a dazzling, glowing sphere that looked like a miniature sun. The multicolored vortex that enveloped the entire Tao platform was none other than the glowing sphere. Nietion suppressed the shock in his heart and took a deep breath. He immediately felt refreshed. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth in this place was so abundant that even the spell formation couldn't compare to it. 1 day of cultivation in this place was equal to half a month of cultivation in the outside world. After a while, everyone else entered. Other than Nietion, there was also a spiritual array master like Yao Fei Ko. A mere restriction obviously could not stop them. What is this place? What is this huge platform for? Was it used by the ancients to worship the heavens? I don't know. These steps are too big. Could it be that someone was 20 meters tall and stepped on 2 to 3 meter steps to get to the platform? That ball of light is so dazzling. It must be something good. I want it. Everyone discussed, and finally, their eyes were fixed on the ball of light above the platform. At this moment, the huge Tao platform suddenly rumbled and violently shook. Following that, the multicolored cyclone in the space above the Tao platform emitted rays of light, forming a huge spherical space around it. The spherical space enveloped everyone. Everyone looked up as if they were under a huge water curtain. Everyone was stunned, not knowing what was happening. Nietion's expression suddenly changed. 2 words appeared in his mind: heaven and earth rules. That's right. He could clearly sense that the spherical water screen in front of him was condensed from the laws of heaven and earth. That kind of vast and majestic power actually made him feel like he had returned to the peak of Heavenly Emperor. The others also sensed the power within the water screen, but they were still puzzled. Among everyone present, only Nietion was once a Heavenly Emperor, and he was the only one who could see that the water screen in front of him was condensed from the laws of heaven and earth. At that moment, rainbow-colored ripples of light appeared in the water curtain above their heads. They suddenly began to circulate, and strange ripples filled the entire water curtain space. Everyone felt an endless power surging into their bodies, giving off an ancient and mysterious aura. Nietion carefully sensed the power circulating in his body, but his expression changed at this moment. He felt the coldest killing intent filling his body, and the domain origin formation in the raw star stone began to operate crazily, as if it had smelled some terrifying aura. "Don't absorb this energy," Nietion shouted, and immediately circulated the yuan qi in his body, forcing the surging killing intent out of his body. Elder Yi and the others saw this and did not ask too much, and hurriedly forced out the strange energy. They had absolute trust in Nye Tian's words. Among the surrounding people, Tang 13, Aoki Lily, Zhang Xiaoi, and those who were familiar with Nye Tian also did the same. Rui Qinyu was also in the crowd. She glanced at Nye Tian and also forced out the strange energy in her body. Nye Tian only then realized that even the deputy city lord of Chaos City, Wan Chirong, had come to the Chaos Abyss. Not only did the others not respond to Nye Tian's shouts, but they were also looking at him with strange expressions, as if they were looking at an idiot. The energy released from the water curtain made their blood boil, and there were even signs of a breakthrough. This kind of energy, of course, had to be absorbed crazily, and the more they absorbed, the better. Nye Tian did not care about the others. In any case, he had already warned them, and if they did not believe him, it was their own business. Bang! At this time, there was a sudden explosion, and blood splattered everywhere. A martial artist actually exploded because he had absorbed too much energy from the water curtain. What's going on? Why can't I control that energy? My blood is burning. I'm boiling. Bang. Following that, someone began to shout, and then, just like the previous person, he exploded. The most tragic cries sounded one after another, and from the crowd came a series of tragic muffled sounds. Every muffled sound represented a martial artist exploding from the energy in his body. In the blink of an eye, dozens of martial artists died. Only then did the crowd realize that Nye Tian's warning was not a joke, and they all began to force out the energy in their body. Those who died were all weak martial artists, and when the essence force in their body could not compete with the absorbed energy, their body would not be able to bear it. What the hell is this place? I want to leave. Someone shouted in panic and rushed towards the periphery of the water curtain, but when his body was just a few meters away from the water curtain shot out a rainbow-colored light blade, and that person was killed on the spot. Seeing this scene, everyone revealed a panicked expression, and some were already scared to tears. Everyone, don't panic. Don't absorb the energy of the water curtain. Don't go near the water curtain. Nye Tian shouted loudly. At this moment, they had to remain calm. Everyone looked at Nye Tian, and the firmness in the latter's eyes made them feel inexplicably at ease. At this time, Yao Fei walked over and said to Nye Tian City Lord, this is a forbidden killing array. Nye Tian nodded. He had already sensed that the aura on the water curtain was becoming more and more violent, and if the crowd could not maintain their calm, it was very likely to trigger the killing array's mechanism. A killing array formed by the heaven and earth laws. Nye Tian already did not know how to define the level of this killing array. The heaven and earth laws, this was a law that only Heavenly Emperor Realm martial artists could comprehend. Mr. Yao, can you see where the array core of the killing array is? Nye Tian asked. Yao Fei Ku was after all the third spiritual array grandmaster on the spiritual array grandmaster board. If even he could not find the array core, then everyone could only wait for death. There, Yao Fei Ku looked at the stone pillar in the center of the Dao platform. It's that light ball. Nye Tian was slightly stunned, and then said, the array creator's attainments in array formations are unfathomable. Would he set the array core in the most obvious place? The light ball at the highest point of the Dao platform was the most eye-catching place in the entire killing array, and the array core was usually hidden in the most inconspicuous place. After all, the array core was the core of the array and also the weakest place. Chapter 454. Yao Fei stared at the ball of light, his expression becoming even more resolute. Large beads of sweat appeared on his forehead as he said in a low voice, because the person who laid this array knows that no one can approach the eye of the array. No one can approach the eye of the array? Nye Tian was slightly surprised, not understanding. Carefully sensed the steps around the platform. Yao Fei stared at the steps carved with a black dragon, a strange light flashing in his eyes. Nye Tian frowned slightly, spreading out his divine sense, carefully sensing every step. These steps seemed to hide some kind of true martial intent, and with every step, the true martial intent becomes stronger. At this time, a figure appeared beside Nyetan, a gentle voice sounding out. Even at this moment of life and death, this person was still calm and indifferent. HM? Nyetian was slightly surprised, looking at the face that suddenly appeared beside him. This was a young man around 20 years old. His aura was completely restrained, exuding a calm and composed temperament. And his face was too good-looking, even more handsome than a woman's. This man could no longer be described as handsome. He was stunning. Let me introduce myself. I am Gu Qiulong. The newcomer faintly smiled, extremely alluring. His voice was also excessively gentle, almost sounding like a sissy. Gu Qiulong? Hearing this name, Nyetian couldn't help but be surprised. Could this be one of the top 3 monstrous geniuses of Sumi Ling City? Yes. Gu Qiulong could see through Nyetian's thoughts, smiling. I am the person you are thinking of, and I also know who you are. Nyetian nodded slightly, evidently not expecting that the Gu family would actually send a monstrous genius like Gu Qiulong to the chaotic abyss. The chaotic abyss was filled with dangers everywhere. The other major forces would only send geniuses that weren't at the peak. After all, the possibility of dying here was very high. Gu Qiulong appearing in the chaotic abyss was indeed surprising. At this time, everyone had no time to be surprised by Gu Qiulong's identity, waiting for Yao Fik and the others to continue. Nyetian's first impression of Gu Qiulong wasn't bad. Although this person was excessively beautiful, he didn't have the arrogance of other monstrous geniuses. So he said, "You are right. There's a great power hidden above these steps, and the source of this power is the eyeball above the Tao platform." Nyetian had already determined that the light ball above the Tao platform was the eye of the killing array. Yao Fik nodded and said, "This Tao platform seems to be able to test a martial artist's talent. The true martial intent on it has a different level of pressure on every martial artist. The stronger the martial artist, the greater the pressure." Nyetian also vaguely sensed this and said, "These steps are divided into 10 levels, and each level has 9 steps. I reckon that each level represents a martial artist realm, and each step represents a small realm. There are 10 steps. The first 9 steps represent the 9 great realms of a martial artist: Origin Meridian Realm, Origin Spirit Realm, Manifestation Realm, Giant Spirit Realm, True Energy Realm, Divine Will Realm, Heaven Evolution Realm, Heaven Man Realm, and Heavenly Emperor Realm. What does the 10th floor represent?" As Gu Qiulong spoke, his expression changed slightly. Divine State. Yao Fei Ku and Nyetian blurted out almost at the same time. Their faces were equally embarrassed. The 10 steps tested a warrior's talent, and the 10th step represented the legendary Divine Realm. This undoubtedly indicated that only martial artists that had a chance of advancing to the godly realm were able to step foot onto the 10th step. The Divine Realm was a realm that only existed in legends. In these 3,000 small worlds, how could there be a martial artist who could advance to the God Realm? No wonder the person who set up the formation had placed the formation core in the most conspicuous place of the killing formation. It was because he knew that no one could reach the 10th step. If they couldn't even reach the 10th step, how could they break through the formation core? "I don't care. I want to get out of here." At this moment, one of the cultivators suddenly shouted and sent a palm strike towards the water screen in the sky. A palm shadow flew out, but when it struck the water screen, there was no movement at all. It was as though it had been directly absorbed. Bang! The martial artist was stunned for a moment. In the next moment, a palm shadow suddenly slammed down from the water screen, directly turning the martial artist into meat paste. The water screen actually absorbed the martial artist's attack and reflected it back. This guy was slapped to death by his own palm. It was too strange. Everyone was stunned on the spot, and no one dared to make a move. Rising Dragon Platform, open. Suddenly, a rumbling voice fell. It was boundless, and no one could pinpoint the source of the voice. However, it clearly resounded in everyone's ears. Rising Dragon Platform. Nyetian's expression was tense. So this Tao platform was called Rising Dragon Platform. which should have the meaning of a carp leaping over the dragon's gate. It indicated that those who could step onto the highest platform were dragons among men. Boom! At this moment, a strange change occurred on the first step of the rising dragon platform. The black dragons carved on it came to life, turning into black flames and surging into the water screen above everyone's heads. Black flame dragons surged in the water screen, and shrill roars rang in everyone's ears. Rising dragon slaying matrix, open. The rumbling voice sounded again. Then, the black dragon statues on the second step slowly came to life and surged into the water screen. Nietion immediately understood. If all the black dragon statues on the 10th step rushed into the water screen, it would be the end of everyone here. F***CK, your grandma. I want to see what's so strange about this rising dragon platform. At this moment, a figure suddenly rose from the ground and rushed toward the rising dragon platform. This person flew into the air, intending to cross all the steps and fly toward the matrix-eye sphere on the rising dragon platform. Whoosh! Just as he approached the rising dragon platform, a murderous aura suddenly flew out, and before he could react, he was sent flying backward. His body was like a kite with a broken string, and blood splattered in the air. When he landed on the ground, he died on the spot. Everyone looked at the corpse and sucked in a breath of cold air. This person was in the true elemental force first realm, but he died just like that. The crowd's faces turned solemn. It seemed that in order to step onto the rising dragon platform, one had to climb the steps step by step. Let me do it. Just then, another figure flew up. This person was much smarter, and he came to the edge of the rising dragon platform and stepped onto the steps. Qiulin. Seeing this figure, Gu Qiulong's expression changed, and he exclaimed. The person who stepped onto the rising dragon platform was his younger brother, Gu Qiulin. Don't worry, he's ascending the rising dragon platform. You should be safe. Nietion looked at Gu Qiulin and said calmly. Nietion had fought with Gu Qiulin before. The latter was in the giant soul stage 9th realm, and he was ranked 21st on the genius list of Su Mi Ling City. Nietion did not know which level he could reach. Everyone's eyes were on Gu Qiulin, who easily reached the 6th step. But after that, every step on the 6th step was extremely difficult for Gu Qiulin. The 6th step represents the spirit wheel stage. This should be the limit of Gu Qiulin's talent. Nietion looked at Gu Qiulin and nodded. Chapter 455. Boom! In that instant, Gu Qiulin felt a tremendous force. It was boundless, as if it had appeared out of thin air. It gave him a feeling that he could not resist it at all. Boom! With a muffled sound, Gu Qiulin was bounced off the platform. After landing, he stood firmly and stared at the rising dragon platform with a pale face, his eyes filled with unwillingness. The force was too terrifying and unstoppable. Even his soul was trembling. He's Gu Qiulin, one of the geniuses of Su Mi Ling Capital, but he only reached the 6th level. Is this rising dragon platform really that terrifying? Someone in the crowd recognized Gu Qiulin and exclaimed. Gu Qiulin was a genius from Su Mi Ling Capital, but he was stopped at the 6th level. This was unacceptable to many. Qiulin, are you all right? Gu Qiulong hurried over and asked anxiously when he saw Gu Qiulin's pale face as if he had just gone through a great battle. Gu Qiulin smiled bitterly. Big brother, that force is too terrifying. I can't stop it. You must be careful if you want to go up. Rest. Gu Qiulong nodded and looked at the rising dragon platform with a solemn expression. Let me do it. I don't believe that this stupid platform is that powerful. At this moment, a voice rang out. A small figure leaped up and stepped onto the rising dragon platform. The crowd was stunned when they saw the figure on the platform. It was a 12 or 13-year-old kid. It's him. Nietion was slightly taken aback when he saw the young face. He was very familiar with this face. It was the one he fought at the Dragon Blood Martial Gathering, Chung Xin. Chung Xin was from one of the 7 top trading groups of the Martial Gathering. He was also the 9th genius on the West Peak region's genius ranking. Despite his young age, he was already at the 6th level of the giant spirit realm. Chung Xin was one of the Martial Gatherings teams. Aoki Lily was also among them. This little fellow's talent is indeed not bad. After not seeing him for such a short period of time, his strength has actually risen by another level. Tian looked at Chung Xen and could not help but reveal an expression of praise. Although Chung Xian's strength was inferior to Gu Qiulin's, his talent was undoubtedly above the latter because he was too young, only 12 years old. Brother Xian, be careful. Chung Xian's older sister, Chung Xian was also present. When she saw her younger brother step onto the rising dragon platform, she couldn't help but shout. Elder sister, don't worry. Brother Xian, do not care about this *T flight of stairs. Chung Xian smiled confidently. Immediately, his figure became like a little rabbit as he swiftly leapt up. In the blink of an eye, Chung Xian's figure arrived at the 6th step. Look, that kid went up to the 6th floor. Just now, Gu Qiulin was blasted down from the 6th floor. I don't know if that kid can still go down, someone exclaimed. It should be possible, and yet Tian murmured, as if he was answering that person, but also talking to himself. He estimated that with Chung Xian's talent, he should be able to reach the 8th level, and even the 9th level. The Rising Dragon platform tested a martial artist's talent, not their strength. Chung Xian was only 12 years old, and he had already reached the 6th layer of the giant spirit realm. This talent was absolutely astonishing, and not inferior to the 3 monsters of Sumi Ling City. Sure enough, Chung Xian's figure flickered a few more times, and he easily passed through the 6th and 7th levels, directly arriving at the 8th level. Damn, he actually reached the 8th level. What is this kid? Why is he so much stronger than Gu Qiulin? Yeah, the 8th level represents the heaven tier. Could it be that this kid will become a heaven tier warrior in the future? That's absolutely impossible. Even Lord Tang Hao and Lord Mo Zhaojing are only spirit wheel realm warriors. It's impossible for this kid to become a heaven tier warrior. This Rising Dragon platform is probably a scam. Seeing Chung Xian step onto the 8th level, the crowd burst into discussion. How is this kid so powerful? Gu Qiulin's brows were tightly knitted, and he suffered a blow. The others did not believe that Chung Xian had the potential to become a heaven-tier warrior, because the 2 pinnacles of the 3,000 small worlds were only spirit wheel realm warriors. They could not even reach the heaven evolution realm, let alone the heaven tier. However, Tian shook his head slightly and said in his heart, Tang Hao and Mo Zhaojing cannot break through the heaven evolution realm, not because of their talent, but because they are in the 3,000 small worlds. The 3,000 small worlds belong to the lower world, and above it was the middle world, Sumi world, and the upper world, the heaven realm and the god realm. In the heaven realm and the god realm, even if the martial artists were not monstrously talented, they could easily reach the spirit wheel realm. For those with amazing talent, it was very easy for them to reach the heaven realm and heavenly emperor realm. The reason for this situation was not because the martial artists in the 3,000 small worlds were less talented than the martial artists in the heaven realm and the god realm, but because of the existence of the plane restriction. The 3,000 small worlds had the plane restriction of the lower level, which meant that even the most monstrous person could only reach the peak of the spirit wheel realm. Sumi world had the plane restriction of the middle level, so the martial artists in that world could at most reach the peak of the heaven realm. The plane restriction of the heaven realm and the god realm was the upper level plane restriction, and the martial artists could reach the peak of the heavenly emperor realm or even break through to the god realm. If Chung Xian was born in the heaven realm and the god realm, his current strength would at least be the peak of the true energy realm or even the spirit wheel realm. A 12-year-old spirit wheel realm martial artist. This was definitely an existence that the martial artists in the 3,000 small worlds could not imagine. This information was probably only known by a few people at the peak. Only after reaching the peak of the spirit wheel realm would one be able to detect the existence of the plane restriction. Chung Xian, you have a monstrous little brother. How enviable. Seeing that Chung Xian had already stepped onto the 8th floor of the Rising Dragon platform, Qing Mu Eureka said sourly. So what if I'm envious? Anyway, it's impossible for your little brother to reach the 8th floor. Chung Xian raised her little face like a proud white swan. Fortunately, Ding Yifan was not here. If he heard Chung Xian say that about him, who knew how he would feel? Chung Xian stepped onto the 8th floor, and every step after that became very slow and difficult. Finally, on the last step of the 8th floor, he finally could not hold on and was directly bombarded by a terrifying force. After Chung Xian landed, he did not stand firm and almost fell. Fortunately, he was supported by Chung Xian. Brother Xian, are you okay? Chung Xian saw that Chung Xian's face was as pale as a sheet and asked with concern. Chung Xian shook his head stubbornly and stared at the rising dragon platform, as if he wanted to try again. However, at this time, another figure had already flown up. That person had only stepped onto the 5th floor and was bombarded down. Immediately after, other martial artists stepped forward one after another, all wanting to know where the limit of their talent was. Unfortunately, most people stopped below the 6th floor, and only a very small number of people were able to step onto the 7th floor. Those who were bombarded down looked at the rising dragon platform unwillingly, all suspecting something. Chapter 456. Look, it's Commander Wu. The crowd couldn't help but exclaim when they saw the figure that suddenly leaped up. The person who suddenly appeared was none other than the Dan Marshall Hall's commander, Wu Mang. Wu Mang was like his name, a brute. After seeing so many people being blasted off the rising dragon platform, he still didn't believe in the rising dragon platform's power. He actually wanted to step onto the rising dragon stone pillar. Watch this commander destroy the rising dragon platform. Wu Mang roared in the air. Essence force surged out of his body as he slammed down with his palm. An enormous aura instantly erupted. Idiot! Upon seeing this, Nie Tian gave the most direct and pertinent evaluation. The rising dragon killing formation was a spirit formation formed by the laws of heaven and earth. How could it be broken so easily? Wu Mang's action was no different from courting death. PFFF. Under the gaze of countless eyes, Wu Mang's palm was actually absorbed by the invisible barrier outside the rising dragon platform. It disappeared without a trace like a clay ox entering the sea. Wu Mang was slightly stunned and instantly flew into a rage. He actually wanted to send out a second palm strike. Unfortunately, in the next moment, there was a rumbling, whistling sound in the air. The palm strike was returned to him, and the aura was even stronger. Wu Mang didn't even have time to react before he screamed. His own palm struck his face, and his figure was smashed into the ground, creating a deep pit. His entire body was covered in blood, and he couldn't even get up. A dignified Dan Marshall Hall commander was beaten down just like that. His face was really thrown back into the womb. Mo Feng, Chiu Wuheng, and the others looked at Wu Mang with shock. Now, they finally believed that the rising dragon platform tested the aptitude of martial artists. Even if their strength far surpassed others, they might not be able to compete with these young people. Hence, it was better not to go up and embarrass themselves. Nie Tian didn't look at Wu Mang either. His eyes were fixed on the rising dragon platform with a solemn expression. With his talent, it was definitely no problem for him to step onto the 9th level, but the 10th level might not be the same. Moreover, there were only 3 steps on the 10th level, but each step was 5 to 6 meters tall. No one knew what it meant. At this moment, the black dragon statues on the 3rd step of the rising dragon platform had begun to emerge. At this rate, it would take at most half an hour for the black dragon statue on the 10th step to be activated. At that time, the black flames would fill the water curtain, and that would be the time when everyone would die. A killing formation condensed from the laws of heaven and earth. Even a heavenly emperor realm martial artist was absolutely unable to contend against it. Let me. Right at this moment, 2 voices rang out at the same time. The 2 people who spoke exchanged glances and smiled. Soon after, they leapt forward and stepped onto the rising dragon stage at the same time. Look, another person is going up. Seeing another person stepping onto the rising dragon arena, the crowd exclaimed. Just now, most of the people had gone up, and the remaining people either didn't want to try, or they knew their limits and didn't want to embarrass themselves. Of course, there are still people who are watching and waiting to go up last, such as Nie Tian, Gu Qiolong, Rui Qinyu, and the others. The two of them should be able to go up to the 9th level. Nie Tian took a good look at the two people's faces. It was Duanmu Lu and Zhan Xiaoi, and his lips curled into a smile. Duanmu Lu's talent in the way of the sword was the strongest person Nie Tian had ever met. Moreover, he had the Khanate 8 Extreme Sword Seal, so he should have no problem entering the 9th level. As for Zhan Xiaoi, he had the Battle Cloud Tyrant body, an Earth-rank spiritual body of heaven and earth. If he was in the Heaven Realm, he could easily advance to the Heavenly Emperor Realm. Head Duanmu, be careful. Gu Wuyo saw Duanmu Lu going up, and her face was full of worry as she reminded loudly. Don't worry. Duanmu Lu turned back and smiled confidently. Then, he looked at Zhan Xiaoi and said loudly, Brother Zhan, please, let's go together. Zhan Xiaoi laughed heartily, and the two of them rushed up the Rising Dragon stage at the same time. The two of them were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, they had arrived at the 8th level. Everyone was dumbfounded by this scene. One had to know that apart from Cheng Xian, no one had ever set foot on the 8th level before. Looking at the two of them, it seemed that reaching the 8th level was very easy. I know, he's the young master of the Battle Cloud sect, the guy who has the Battle Cloud Tyrant body. No wonder. So he's the #1 genius of the North Sea region. No wonder he could reach the 8th level so easily. But who is the person beside Zhan Xiaoi? I've never seen him before, and he seems to be a few years younger. I don't know, he should be a genius from the other 3 domains. Zhan Xiaoi's reputation was obviously much higher than Duanmu Lu's. Most people only knew the former and not the latter. General Gu, your future man is going to be famous this time. Nie Tian looked at Duanmu Lu, his eyes filled with gratification. As the teacher, his disciple was famous. He was also basking in the glory. Gu Wuyo wasn't the least bit shy. Instead, he had a proud expression and said, The man that I, Gu Wuyo, fancy is naturally extraordinary. Nie Tian was speechless. He seriously suspected that in the future, Duanmu Lu would be like a little sheep next to Gu Wuyo. Gu Wuyo, don't you want to try? Nie Tian looked at the heroic girl beside him and suddenly asked. Gu Wuyo was very hesitant, and he smiled and said, Forget it. Nie Tian frowned slightly and said in his heart, Gu Wuyo, is there really a big secret on you? Nie Tian had already discovered that ever since they entered the chaotic abyss, the great Chu State preceptor, Tawny, would look in his direction from time to time. Not only was she interested in Nie Tian, but the way she looked at Gu Wuyo was also very unusual. Nie Tian guessed that the person who left Gu Wuyo in the great Chu Imperial City was Tawny. As for what exactly was on Gu Wuyo that was worth Tawny's attention, Nie Tian really couldn't guess. He couldn't sense any noteworthy aura from Gu Wuyo's body. Look, they've reached the 9th level, the crowd exclaimed. Nie Tian looked up and saw that Zhan Xiaoi and Duanmu Lu had indeed stepped onto the 9th level. The two of them had reached the 9th level, but they still had a relaxed expression on their faces. It was unknown whether it was an act or not. The two of them were friends, but they were also competitors. Neither of them would be convinced. Brother Zhan, are you all right? Duanmu Lu smiled faintly, but no matter how he tried to hide it, his expression was still a little ugly. If you don't go down, then I won't go down. Zhan Xiaoi's determined face squeezed out a smile. It was obvious that he was already feeling the pressure. Nie Tian caught both of their reactions and murmured, These two will at most reach the last step of the 9th level. That's their limit. Right now, the pressure that Zhan Xiaoi and Duanmu Lu were enduring was definitely unimaginable to ordinary people. Every step that followed would be a huge challenge for them. To be able to reach the last step of the 9th level, that also required absolute determination. On the Rising Dragon platform, any martial technique was useless. It tested a cultivator's talent and determination. If one wanted to step onto the highest level, neither could be lacking. Zhan Xiaoi and Duanmu Lu's figures continued to rise, and they really reached the 9th step of the 9th level. One more step, and the two of them would be able to step onto the 10th level. Brother Zhan, this is my limit. but I still want to try one more time. The corners of Duanmu Lu's mouth curled up in a bitter smile. His face was already as pale as a sheet, and it was as if all the essence energy in his body had been sucked out. He didn't have the slightest bit of strength left in his body. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible for him to step onto the 5 to 6 meter high step. Chapter 457. My God, they walked to the peak of the 9th level. Doesn't that mean that both of them have the potential to advance to peak 9th level Heavenly Emperor? This is also too terrifying, right? Biological father. They don't plan on giving up. Could it be that they still want to go up to the 10th level? These two fellows are too terrifying. F*CK. Why can't I even go up to the 6th level? I want to cry. When the crowd saw that Zhang Xiaoi and Duanmu Lu did not plan on stopping, they exclaimed one after another. Most of the people here had just been bombarded down by the Rising Dragon platform's power. At this moment, they no longer doubted the Rising Dragon platform's power. That kind of formless, boundless, and irresistible power was truly terrifying. For two people to be able to step onto the 9th level, it was truly astounding. Without a doubt, if this group of people could leave the chaos abyss alive today, Zhang Xiaoi and Duanmu Lu's names would spread throughout the entire Trichiliocosm rapidly. Silly blockhead, quickly come down. Gu Wuyo could not help shouting when he saw that Duanmu Lu still wanted to try, with an anxious look. It's fine. As long as they follow the Rising Dragon platform's rules, the Rising Dragon platform won't harm them. Nie Tian looked at the two figures on the Rising Dragon platform, his expression becoming solemn. Yao Fik and Gu Qiulong and the rest were all stunned for a moment. They did not expect that someone could really step onto the 9th level's final step. The two people were both spirit formation masters. Furthermore, their mental strength was astonishing. The array formation Dao intent circulating on the Rising Dragon platform was absolutely no joke. Brother Jean, let's go. Duanmu Lu roared angrily and leaped with all his might. His figure rose several meters into the air. Just as he was about to touch the 10th step, he suddenly felt an overwhelming force pressing down on him from all directions. He was completely unable to resist it. Arg! Duanmu Lu cried out tragically. The instant his figure was about to fall, a hand grabbed him. It was precisely Zhang Xiaoi. Zhang Xiaoi forcefully pulled Duanmu Lu up and said with a bitter smile, Brother Duanmu, are you all right? I'm fine. Duanmu Lu's complexion was pale, blood spilling out of the corners of his mouth. But the determination in his eyes did not diminish in the slightest as he said, Brother Jean, come and try. Yes. Zhang Xiaoi nodded and stomped hard on the ground. Her body rose from the ground, but the result was the same as Duanmu Lu. She was also blasted down at the edge of the 10th level. This time, it was Duanmu Lu's turn to pull Zhang Xiaoi back. What had happened on the Rising Dragon platform astonished everyone. Both of them were so strong that they could remain so determined under such circumstances. They must have great willpower. If you want to succeed, you need friends. If you want great success, you need opponents. Duanmu Lu and Zhang Xiaoi are both friends and opponents. Perhaps they'll be able to make it to the 10th level. Nie Tian's eyes grew fierce as he looked at the unyielding figures on the Rising Dragon arena. Following that, the two figures on the Rising Dragon platform kept trying, failing, and being pulled back again and again. The martial artists below the platform were dumbfounded. They did not dare to imagine how strong Zhang Xiaoi and Duanmu Lu's willpower must be. Everyone knew that when one reached one's limit on the Rising Dragon platform, the pressure was overwhelming. It was a power that made one despair and unable to resist. Zhang Xiaoi and Duanmu Lu did not give up even after so many failures. Their willpower far exceeded that of ordinary people. Mr. Nya, your disciple, and that kid from the Zhang family are not simple. Elder Yu is a tough person. Seeing the scene on the Rising Dragon platform, he couldn't help but be respectful. The path of martial arts is meant to defy the heavens. Those who can stand at the peak are all people with indomitable will. Both of them have reached their limits, but they still do not give up. I believe that their willpower will allow them to break through their limits. Tian said solemnly, his voice cold and calm. Brother Jean, let's do it together. On the rising dragon platform, both of them were already covered in blood. Duanmu Lu looked at Zhang Xiaoyi with determination. All right, Zhang Xiaoyi roared. Then, both figures leaped up at the same time. Just as they were about to step onto the 10th step, both of them took the initiative to retreat. Huh? Tian was taken aback. He quickly understood that both of them wanted to push the other up to the 10th step. Unfortunately, both of them retreated at the same time, causing them to move further and further away from the 10th step. Both of them understood each other's intentions. Smiling at each other, they no longer had any regrets and prepared to be thrown off the rising dragon platform. The crowd's eyes were filled with regret. Between Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu, one of them could have reached the 10th step. However, due to mutual modesty, both of them lost the opportunity. Reaching the 10th step not only meant that one was talented, but it also meant that one could get close to the rising dragon pillar and have a chance to destroy the orb. As long as the orb was destroyed, the rising dragon killing formation would be broken and everyone would survive. What a pity, such a great opportunity was missed just like that. However, just as everyone thought that Zhang Xiaoyi was about to be thrown off the platform, something strange happened. Roar! A powerful and surging dragon roar sounded. Soon after, a dragon figure surged out from the rising dragonstone pillar. It suddenly shook, and a strange energy appeared. It actually forcefully dragged Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu back to the 10th level. The two of them stood on the 10th step, looking at each other, not knowing what had happened. Those with great perseverance trigger the sigh of the rising dragon. The next moment, the rumbling voice rang out again. The sigh of the rising dragon. Everyone was stunned. They did not understand what it meant. However, thinking back to that dragon roar, it did sound like a sigh. Tian shook his head slightly. He guessed that the so-called sigh of the rising dragon was a form of encouragement for those with great perseverance. It looked like this rising dragon platform was interesting. Not only was it a killing formation, it was also very humane and knew how to encourage others. Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu looked at each other. Then, at the 10th step in front of them, they smiled at each other and did not force it, jumping off the rising dragon platform. To be able to trigger the sigh of the rising dragon, it was enough to show Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu's perseverance. Looks like the legendary godly state does exist. The corners of Tian's lips curled up, his eyes filled with desire. With Zhang Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu as examples, there were others who tried to climb the rising dragon platform at the same time. But without exception, all of them failed. It was already difficult to find two cultivators with similar talents, and it was almost impossible to ask these two cultivators to be people who would not give up. Among them, the more outstanding ones were Gu Qiulong and Xiu Xiaofeng. However, the two of them could only reach the middle of the 9th step before they could no longer hold on and were blasted down. Aokiki Lily and Cheng Xian are also reached the 9th step, but they also died. Gu Wuyo, are you interested? Are you waiting for a suitable partner? Tian noticed Gu Wuyo's gaze on the rising dragon platform and could not help but smile. If there's someone worthy of being my partner, I don't mind giving it a try. The corners of Gu Wuyo's lips curled up, looking very confident. At this moment, a beautiful figure appeared in front of the rising dragon platform. Gu Wuyo, your good partner has appeared. Tian saw the figure and nodded slightly with a smile. That's her, Gu Wuyo agreed. He leaped up and stood shoulder to shoulder with Raindrop Chinya. They exchanged a glance, and although they didn't say anything, they understood each other's intentions. Chapter 458. The Rising Dragon's sigh made Tian understand that the Rising Dragon platform was not only a killing formation, but also a mysterious spiritual formation that hid the ultimate martial truth. It's two women. Everyone was shocked and exclaimed in a low voice. They did not expect that there would be two women challenging the Rising Dragon platform at this time. Rui Qinyu, Vice City Lord Wan Qirong, looked at her new disciple and frowned. She smiled and thought to herself, you have the 9-color pupils. Can you make it to the 10th level? Wan Qirong's eyes were a little complicated. There was a little worry and a little desire. Gu Wuyo, on the other side, when Great Chu's imperial tutor Hu Shaoli saw Gu Wuyo's figure appear, a trace of palpitation flashed through her beautiful eyes. Her heart was indescribably excited. Gu Wuyo, the thing that my dear sister left on your body, should have matured by now. Tawny's delicate face was hidden under the veil, but her aura was perfectly captured by Nietian. As expected, State Preceptor, you have ulterior motives for Gu Wuyo. Nietian glanced at Tawny and sneered in his heart, but he did not show it on his face. No matter what Tawny wanted from Gu Wuyo, Nietian would not let her get what she wanted. However, the most important thing now was to see how far Rui Qinyu and Gu Wuyo could go on the Rising Dragon platform. Nietian estimated that with Rui Qinyu's talent, she could at least make it to the 9th level. As for whether she could make it to the 10th level, it would depend on her determination. As for Gu Wuyo, although her talent was not as good as Rui Qinyu's, even Nietian did not know what kind of secret she was hiding. These two women had great hatred in their hearts, but their personalities were completely different. One was cold as ice, and the other was passionate. How far could they go? Just when the crowd was feeling puzzled, two devastatingly beautiful figures had already easily arrived at the 6th level. He has reached the Spirit Wheel stage. The 6th level represented the Spirit Wheel stage. The crowd exclaimed in a low voice. Rui Qinyu and Gu Wuyo didn't look at each other and rushed to the higher floors. Their speed was extremely fast. After a few flashes, they arrived at the 9th floor. The 9th level represented the Heavenly Emperor realm. The martial artists present that could reach this realm could be counted on one hand. At this moment, the crowd became much more nervous. Most people did not expect that these two seemingly unremarkable and unknown women would be able to step onto the 9th level so easily. One had to know that even Gu Qiulong, who was known as one of the 3 monstrous geniuses of Sumeru's spirit capital, had only reached the 9th floor. Stepping onto the 9th floor, Rui Qinyu and Gu Wuyo finally looked at each other and then rushed again. After a few leaps, they arrived at the last step of the 9th floor. They were only one step away from stepping onto the 10th step, the legendary God realm. They are almost at the 10th floor. The crowd was boiling with excitement as they looked at the two beautiful figures on the Rising Dragon platform. Rui Qinyu and Gu Wuyo raised their heads at the same time and looked at the high platform in front of them with steely eyes. There was no hint of fear in their eyes, but they were unusually determined. The two nodded heavily and actually leaped up at the same time. The two figures stepped onto the 10th floor like a dream. Their bodies swayed slightly, and immediately they stood firm. Roar! At this moment, the Rising Dragon sigh sounded again, but there was no Dragon Shadow because the two of them no longer needed the Dragon Shadow's help. The two figures stood firmly on the first step of the first floor. Their backs were devastatingly beautiful, but they had the grandeur of a towering mountain. At this moment, the crowd felt as if they were hallucinating. It was as if the figures on the Rising Dragon platform were not humans, but two majestic gods. That kind of figure made people feel awe, and even their souls could not help but tremble. Master, Wuyo, she has reached the 10th floor. Duanmu Lu blurted out in a daze. Nietian was also shocked. After a while, he nodded with a smile and said, "Brat, you have picked up a treasure this time." Nietian did not expect that Rui Qinyu and Gu Wuyo could easily step onto the 10th floor, because he had always thought that it would not be so easy to reach the legendary immortal state. It seems that the divine realm is not as difficult as I thought. The martial artists must have made a mistake. Or maybe I'm exaggerating the difficulty of the god realm. Nietian thought to himself. His desire and confidence to reach the god realm rose once again. There were only 3 steps on the 10th floor, but the height of the 3 steps was 5 to 6 meters. He wondered what it meant. There were only 3 steps on the 10th floor, but the height of the 3 steps was 5 to 6 meters. He wondered what it meant. Under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, the two figures leaped up again. When they landed, actually stood firmly on the 2nd step of the 10th floor. Another step. The crowd was on the verge of exploding. They could even feel their souls trembling. Who are these two girls? They are even more powerful than Gu Qiolong and Zhang Xiaoi with the War Clue Tyrant body. The 10th floor represents the legendary immortal state. Their potential is too terrifying. Spirit Formation Master Yao Feek looked at the two figures, the muscles on his face and the voice in his throat trembling. He was a Spirit Formation Master, and no one present knew better than him how terrifying the Rising Dragon platform was. It was hard to imagine that someone could step onto the 10th floor so easily. The older martial artists present were all shocked. Even Yi Linyun, the madman, had a burning look on his face. Wu Mang's failure made them realize that they should not go up and embarrass themselves at their age. Moreover, everyone could see that the Rising Dragon platform tested one's talent. Those with different cultivation levels would definitely experience different pressures. Moreover, those who had gone up the Rising Dragon platform, no matter what the result was, would all have a pale face, as if their origin energy had been depleted. Elder Yi did not go up the Rising Dragon platform because he was concerned about the safety of Tian and the others. If his strength was depleted by the Rising Dragon platform, there was no guarantee that Jiao Jingde, Mo Feng, and the others would not attack Tian. At this moment, the black dragon carvings on the steps of the Rising Dragon platform were still surging into the water curtain, turning into black flames and glaring at the crowd. This was a clock of life and death. With every step they took, they were one step closer to death. When all the black dragon carvings were activated, the Rising Dragon killing formation would be fully activated. Even a heavenly emperor would die in the formation formed by the laws of heaven and earth. At this moment, on the Rising Dragon platform, Rui Qinyu and Gu Wuyo's figures moved again. As long as they took one more step, they would be able to step onto the Rising Dragon platform. At the same time, they would be closer to the Rising Dragon stone pillars, and they would have a chance to destroy the formation Eye Sphere. Go! They shouted in unison, and the two figures leaped up. At this instant, two rays of white light suddenly surged out from the Rising Dragon stone pillars and surged toward the two. Two pairs of beautiful eyes flickered slightly, and the two rays of white light swept past their bodies, as if it was some kind of final test. Chapter 459. Hold it right there. Countless pairs of eyes were instantly stunned. The scene froze in that instant, and everyone's expressions were collectively petrified. At that moment, the two ladies were like kings standing at the top of the heavens. It was as if the entire space was lit up because of them. Boom! Suddenly, the Rising Dragon arena shook. Unparalleled king, trigger the rage of the Rising Dragon. The booming voice sounded again. Following that, the stone pillars with dragon carvings on the Rising Dragon ring began to move. The rage of the Rising Dragon. As the booming voice sounded, the stone pillars in the center of the Rising Dragon ring began to move as if they had come alive. Boom! Boom! The next moment, two colorful cyclones appeared from the 100-meter-tall stone pillars and attacked Rui Qinyu and Gu Wuyo. The two of them snapped out of their daze and looked at each other. Suddenly, they realized that their yuan qi that had been drained had returned. It was extremely strange. The two of them moved at the same time and stood back to back, dodging the two cyclones. The next moment, the two colorful cyclones hovered in the air and expanded abruptly. Following that, something even stranger happened. Two giant dragon heads appeared from the expanding cyclones. The dragon eyes, dragon whiskers, dragon horns, and dragon scales were vivid as if they were alive. The crowd was shocked when they saw the scene on the Rising Dragon ring. That was a real mystical dragon. The dragon energy surged through the entire Rising Dragon killing formation. Everyone felt a shiver that came from the depths of their souls. The rage of the Rising Dragon. Tian's expression was extremely ugly. He suddenly realized that other than testing a martial artist's talent and determination, the last floor of the Rising Dragon ring also tested a martial artist's combat strength. Only by defeating the divine dragon that manifested on the Rising Dragon stone pillars would one truly be acknowledged by the Rising Dragon platform. Roar! On the Rising Dragon platform, the two dragons let out furious roars at the same time. Their complete bodies were finally revealed. They were 100 meters long and emitted a strong, murderous intent. Their eyes were like the sun and the moon, staring at Raindrop, Chinya, and Guwuyo. Master, will Worryless be all right? Duanmu Lu's heart leaped to his throat when he saw this scene, and he asked with a worried expression. However, as soon as he turned around, he discovered that Nie Tion's figure had disappeared. Nie Tion took a step forward and arrived before the rising dragon platform. Looking up at the 100-meter-tall steps, he growled, "I'd like to see just how strong the rising dragon's fury is." At the same time, another shadow appeared. It was Tang 13. The two exchanged a glance, but they did not speak. They only smiled at each other before their figures flashed, and they flew towards the rising dragon stage. Look, someone else was going to the rising dragon arena, and there were two of them. It's Heaven Luo City Governor Nie Tion, and the 13th young master of the Tang family. The 13th young master of the Tang family? Isn't that guy a good-for-nothing? Cripple your sister. The Tang clan's elder is right here. Are you King tired of living? The crowd exclaimed. Their eyes darted between the two dragons on the rising dragon platform and the two figures who were running wildly below. As Tang Yuyu was in seclusion, she did not appear in the chaos abyss. Tang 13 did not want her to appear either. After all, it was too dangerous here. Moreover, Tang 13 knew that Tang Yuyu was brought out of the chaos abyss by her father, Tang Duan. Therefore, she did not want Tang Yuyu to return to the chaos abyss. On the rising dragon platform, the two dragons roared angrily. Their terrifying dragon energy was terrifying to the extreme. Their giant bodies tumbled in the air as if they were about to shatter this part of the world. Thousand Leaves Whirlwind. Rui Qianyu's eyes flashed with anger. She struck out with her palm, and several green leaves turned into wind blades that attacked the divine dragon. Bang! A muffled sound could be heard. It was as if her attack had only tickled the divine dragon. The latter did not react at all. Smack! At the same time, Gu Wuyo attacked with her scarlet firmament Feihong whip. However, she was met with the same awkward situation. The divine dragon almost ignored her attack. The two divine dragons roared as their dragon energy condensed into an endless amount of pressure. The two of them could hardly breathe. Swoosh! The divine dragon's front claws came crashing down like they were made of steel. The space around them tightened. Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo had nowhere to hide. The aftershock of the dragon's claws hit them, and several bloody wounds appeared on their bodies. Blood flowed continuously and dyed their bodies red. With just a single claw attack, the two of them were already unable to withstand it. At that moment, Nie Tion and Tang 13 arrived at the 9th floor in the blink of an eye. However, the crowd's attention was on the battle on the rising dragon platform. Not many people noticed that Nie Tion and Tang 13 had arrived at the 9th floor. Rui Qianyu and Gu Wuyo were fighting against the two divine dragons. The two of them were completely suppressed and could not fight back. Faster! Nie Tion saw that the two of them were in danger. His expression darkened, and he increased his speed again. On the 9th floor, Nie Tion did not feel much pressure. Tang 13 was the same. Tang Hao had identified him as the Tang family's most powerful ghost eye prodigy in 100 years. His talent was undeniably terrifying. Just as the two of them were madly rushing up the stairs, another figure appeared below the rising dragon platform. The person wore a faceless mask and concealed his aura. When he first appeared, he did not attract much attention. In the blink of an eye, the figure appeared on the stairs of the 9th floor of the rising dragon platform. Only then did Nie Tion realize that there was another person behind him. Tang 13 was also shocked. She stared at the faceless person in front of her, speechless. The person's speed on the rising dragon platform was no slower than Nie Tion and Tang 13. Look, there's another person. The crowd exclaimed when they noticed the faceless person. Damn it, where did all these freakishly talented people come from? Gu Qiolong looked at the figures on the rising dragon platform. He was depressed. No matter what, he was one of the 3 most talented geniuses of Mount Meru Spirit City. Even after expending tremendous effort, He had only managed to reach the ninth floor. However, Niet Tian and the others had reached the ninth floor with ease. And Tang 13, one of the top 3 geniuses in Sumi Ling City, was also able to reach the ninth floor. This made Gu Qiulong very uncomfortable. Mo, Feng, Qiu Wuheng, and the others were equally embarrassed, especially when they saw Niet Tian and Tang 13 appear on the ninth floor. Niet Tian was on their list of people they must kill, and Tang 13 was a member of the Tang family. Even though the 4 aristocratic families were closely related, they were also competitors. The appearance of a super genius in the Tang family was undoubtedly a potential threat to the Mo and Qiu families. Just then, cries of agony came from the rising dragon platform. Rui Qinyu and Gu Wuyo were thrown out by the giant dragon's attack. Blood sprayed out of their mouths. The 2 fell from the sky, covered in blood. Their faces were as white as paper. It was obvious that they could not hold on much longer. Rui Qinyu and Gu Wuyo exchanged a look. Their eyes were filled with determination. The next second, Rui Qinyu's pupils changed. Strange vibrations emitted from her eyes. Oh no! Niet Tian's heart sank. Rui Qinyu was about to use her rainbow pupils. Then, Gu Wuyo's petite body shook. A shadow of a crimson fox appeared behind her. A terrifying aura filled the entire rising dragon platform. Chapter 460. What a terrifying aura! Niet Tian's face darkened as he sensed the chilling aura emanating from the rising dragon platform. Behind Gu Wuyo, the phantom of a demonic fox with a strange red glow slowly became more lifelike, and the entire rising dragon arena was dyed a fiery red. Suddenly, a scorching aura spread out, and the surrounding air became misty, instantly turning into a huge furnace. This scorching aura was exceptionally ferocious, causing the 2 mystical dragons to feel threatened. Their scales felt like they were about to explode, and they couldn't help but retreat. Their huge eyes stared at Gu Wuyo with deep wariness. Damn, what's that behind him? It looks like a fox. The crowd was shocked when they saw the demonic fox behind Gu Wuyo. Even in the rising dragon formation, the powerful aura of the demonic fox was unstoppable. Everyone felt their chests heat up and beads of sweat appeared on their foreheads. At that moment, Niet Tian's expression froze, and he could not react for a long time. Niet Tian, are you all right? Tang 13 asked when she saw the strange look in Niet Tian's eyes. It was not wise to be spacing out when one was about to break through to the 10th level of the immortal state. Niet Tian came to his senses, and a name popped up in his mind. Red Lotus Demon Lord. Master! Corpse Demon Lord's voice rang out at that moment, filled with shock. She's the descendant of Red Lotus. The Red Lotus that Corpse Demon Lord mentioned and the Red Lotus Demon Lord that Niet Tian mentioned were the same person. Red Lotus Demon Lord, one of the 9 demon lords under the command of the Demon King of the Abyss, Wu Xiaotian. Red Lotus Demon Lord, the ruler of the Red Lotus country. In the demon world, he was second only to the Demon King of the Abyss. In his previous life, the person that Niet Tian was most afraid of in the demon world was undoubtedly the Demon King of the Abyss, and the person that he was second to was the Red Lotus Demon Lord. The Red Lotus Demon Monarch was the only female among the 9 great demon monarchs. However, her strength was much stronger than the other 8 great demon monarchs. Even the Corpse Demon Monarch had to admit defeat. The Red Lotus Devil Monarch had fused with the divine soul of the Red Lotus Demon Fox, one of the 9 supreme devil beasts of the 9 underworlds, to create the Scarlet Soul Red Lotus Origin Spirit. This was one of the few origin spirits that were born after birth, and it was equivalent to his second origin spirit. The Scarlet Spirit Red Lotus was regarded as the national soul of the Red Lotus country. It was equivalent to the mark of the Red Lotus ruler. Whenever the Red Lotus ruler was alive, the Scarlet Spirit Red Lotus mark would be planted in the body of the next Red Lotus ruler. That way, when the Red Lotus ruler died, the Scarlet Spirit Red Lotus in his body would automatically be transferred to the next Red Lotus ruler. The demonic fox that appeared behind Gu Wuyo was the legendary Red Lotus country's national soul, the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. Tian couldn't figure out why the Scarlet Soul Red Lotus was on Gu Wuyo's body. Could it be that she, like Tang Yuyu, was also a member of the Devil Clan? The hole in his brain was a little too big. Tian couldn't react for a moment. However, he finally understood why Tawny was so interested in Gu Wuyo. Tian didn't think too much about it. He quickly focused his attention on climbing the Rising Dragon platform. If he couldn't even make it to the 10th floor of the Rising Dragon platform, he would be in trouble. The Crimson Soul Red Lotus. It's finally here. Below the Rising Dragon platform, Tawny couldn't hide her excitement. Her body trembled slightly, but she thought viciously, "My dear sister, even if you didn't give me the Crimson Soul Red Lotus, I would have gotten it for myself." At this moment, Hu Shaoli was looking at Gu Wuyo, her eyes revealing an extreme desire. The Crimson Soul Red Lotus was the national soul of the Red Lotus country. However, the national soul was in the body of a human girl. This was something that Tawny couldn't accept. "Sister, when you married Gu Fei back then, you broke the rules of the Red Lotus royal family, which forbids marriage with outsiders. I had no choice but to kill you. Now that your and Gu Fei's daughter has finally grown up, it's time for me to get the Crimson Soul Red Lotus back then." Tawny's eyes burned with greed and coldness. Gu Fei. If Gu Wuyo heard this name, she would definitely be grief-stricken. That was her father's name. Gu Wuyo would never have guessed that her mother was not human, but a member of the Red Lotus clan from the Devil World. Moreover, her identity was extraordinary. She was the ruler of the Red Lotus country. The imperial advisor of Great Chu, Tawny, was actually her aunt. Unfortunately, her aunt, Tawny, was only interested in the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. She held a great deal of resentment towards Gu Wuyo himself. From Tawny's point of view, the Crimson Soul Red Lotus should have been passed down to her. Gu Wuyo, a human with an impure bloodline, was not worthy of the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. Boom! At that moment, a strange explosion erupted from the Rising Dragon platform. The shadow of the demonic fox behind Gu Wuyo gradually solidified. Suddenly, a huge blood-red lotus slowly appeared on the demonic fox's body, and then suddenly bloomed. The blood-red lotus bloomed layer by layer. Suddenly, a boundless aura spread out, and the momentum of heaven and earth immediately changed. At that moment, Gu Wuyo was like a huge black hole that could devour everything around her. The crowd trembled as they watched the scene on the Rising Dragon platform. They were so shocked that they couldn't speak. The red lotus bloomed. An overwhelming killing intent spread out. Everyone felt their hearts sink, and even their souls seemed to be trembling. Crimson Soul Red Lotus. Gu Wuyo is indeed the descendant of the Red Lotus Devil Lord. Niet Tian was shocked, and his expression was one of astonishment. He was very sure that the lotus bloomed on Gu Wuyo was the soul of the Red Lotus country, the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. He also knew that the Crimson Soul Red Lotus could only be inherited by those with the royal bloodline of the Red Lotus country. This was because the first owner of the Crimson Soul Red Lotus was the Red Lotus Devil Lord. She had left a bloodline mark on the Crimson Soul Red Lotus, so only those with the royal bloodline could control the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. If others wanted to obtain the Crimson Soul Red Lotus, not only would it be impossible, but they would also be devoured by the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. At that moment, Nietian looked at Tawny and murmured to himself, "Lord Imperial Preceptor, since you're so interested in the Crimson Soul Red Lotus, it seems that you're also a member of the Red Lotus royal family. No wonder your aura is so strange." When Nietian first saw Tawny, he sensed that the latter's aura was different from that of an ordinary person, but he didn't think too much about it at the time. Now that he remembered it, everything was much clearer. Nietian had known Gu Wuyo for so long, but he had never sensed any unusual aura from her. This was very inconsistent with her identity as a member of the Red Lotus royal family. "Gu Wuyo, it seems that you have a half-human, half-demon bloodline. If my guess is correct, your mother is a member of the Red Lotus clan, and your father is a human." Nietian thought to himself. Gu Wuyo's bloodline contained both demon and human bloodlines. It was her human bloodline that covered up her Red Lotus bloodline. The power of her bloodline was so powerful that it was even stronger than the royal bloodline of the Red Lotus royal family. This undoubtedly meant that Gu Wuyo's father was no ordinary person. Chapter 461. The Red Lotus demonic flame condensed into a sword of flame. The surging aura caused the space to emit a strange, squeezing sound. The moment the sword of flame appeared, the divine dragon actually sensed danger. Its huge eyes revealed a look of fear. Its body couldn't help but retreat. Red Lotus demonic fire. Seeing the flaming sword on the rising dragon platform, Niet Tian's voice trembled. I didn't expect Gu Wuyo's crimson soul Red Lotus to produce the Red Lotus demonic fire. The Red Lotus demonic fire was ranked 11th on the demonic fire list, and was even more terrifying than the Doomsday Flame, which was ranked 13th. The Red Lotus demonic fire was the most bizarre of all the demonic fires because it was not born from nature, but from the Crimson Soul Red Lotus. The Crimson Soul Red Lotus was formed from the soul of the Red Lotus demonic fox, one of the 9 supreme demonic beasts of the demon world. The Red Lotus demonic fox was a mutated ancient demonic beast, a terrifying existence that surpassed the 9th grade. Therefore, it was rumored that the Red Lotus demonic fire could instantly kill a peak Heavenly Emperor powerhouse. However, the Red Lotus demonic fire had 9 wheels. Even the Red Lotus demon lord, who had refined the Crimson Soul Red Lotus, only had 6 wheels in his body when he died. Niet Tian had once fought with the Red Lotus demon lord. Even though the Red Lotus demonic fire only had 6 wheels, it was enough to make Niet Tian struggle. If the Red Lotus demonic fire had 9 wheels, Niet Tian would have died. Looking at Gu Wuyo's Red Lotus demonic fire, there was a light rotating in the center of each flame. Obviously, it was only 1 wheel. However, this was already very terrifying. Niet Tian estimated that even if there was only 1 round of the Red Lotus demonic flame, it would be enough to instantly kill a warrior below the 3rd level of True Element. It could even threaten a high-level True Element Realm Warrior. Yeah, at this moment, the 9th level Chaos Beast in the Chaotic Origin coffin suddenly woke up and let out a strange cry. Its crimson eyes looked at the Red Lotus demonic fire on the rising dragon platform, burning with desire. Ever since Little Nine swallowed the Doomsday Flame, it had been busy refining it. It would only wake up when Niet Tian was in danger. Now that he had woken up, it was obvious that he was very interested in the Red Lotus demonic fire. Yeah. Little Nine's eyes were burning, looking at the Red Lotus demonic flame as if it was about to jump up. Foodie, Corpse Luo, Demon Monarch, couldn't help but say when he saw Little Nine's actions, but the latter immediately looked at him with ill intentions, scaring Corpse Luo so much that he hurriedly waved his little claws and said, "Brother Nine, you've misunderstood. I'm talking about myself." Little Nine proudly turned his head away. That's more like it expression on his face. Niet Tian was rendered speechless by everything that had happened in the Primal Chaos original coffin. If it wasn't for the fact that he was currently climbing the Rising Dragon platform, he would have laughed out loud. Little Nine was indeed a foodie. He wanted to eat anything and dared to eat anything. He wanted to eat the Doomsday Flame, the Tier 8 medicinal herbs, the ancient dragon soul, and even the Red Lotus demonic flame. If the Niet Tian in his previous life had such a powerful gluttonous primordial spirit, then he wouldn't need to fear the Red Lotus demon monarch. He could just directly devour the Red Lotus demonic fire. Bang! At that moment, the Red Lotus demonic flame condensed a sword of flames and struck a dragon. With a muffled sound, the sword pierced through one of the dragon's arms. Oh, the dragon let out a pained howl, but the next moment, the injured part not only stopped bleeding, but it also recovered in an instant. It recovered directly? Gu Wuyo looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief. Blue, I freeze. On the other side, Rui Qinyu released the power of her eyes. Both the blue and red eyes were activated at the same time. Boom! Instantly, an icy aura spread out. Crack, crack, crack. A dragon was directly frozen. In the next moment, a pair of pure flame wings appeared. Like a giant burning bird, it flew towards the dragon. The dragon sensed the threat, but it was frozen, unable to move its huge body. However, the moment the ice seal was lifted, the flaming wings swept past, and the divine dragon looked as if it had been fried in a pan of oil. The dragon's scales all over its body cracked, and even its flesh was torn apart. It was extremely terrifying. The power of the 9-color eyes was not to be underestimated. What a terrifying power! The crowd shuddered. A dragon was destroyed to this extent by the power of the eyes. It was too terrifying. Who the hell is this woman? Why are her eyes so terrifying? Her eyes seem to be even scarier than the Tang family's ghost eye. Could they be one of the legendary 10 exceptional eyes? She was able to step onto the 10th level of the Rising Dragon platform and fight with the dragon. That pair of eyes must be one of the 10 exceptional eyes. The crowd discussed. The Vice City Lord of Chaos City, Wan Shi Rong, was looking at Rainy Chinya with a burning gaze. She couldn't help but smile, as if she was rejoicing that she had taken in a good disciple, but she also seemed to be thinking about something else. Rui Chinyu used the power of the 9-color eyes and the red eye to cause great damage to the dragon. However, in the next moment, the dragon's almost destructive damage actually began to recover. Because Rui Chinyu had used the 9-color eyes too much, blood seeped out of her eyes. She staggered and almost couldn't stand. "Are you all right?" Gu Wuyo came to her side and helped her up. Rui Chinyu nodded indifferently and didn't say anything else. She still had a blood feud with the Bloody Slaughter Palace. How could she die in a Rising Dragon formation? Oh no! Nie Tian saw the blood seeping out of Rui Chinyu's eyes and knew that the power of the blood devourer in her body was starting to backfire. Activating the blue, eye, and red, I was definitely a huge burden for Rui Chinyu. "Let's go!" Nie Tian bellowed as he leapt into the air and landed firmly on the 10th floor. Roar! The deep sigh of the rising dragon sounded again. At almost the same time, 2 figures stood on either side of him. One was Tang 13, and the other was the black-robed martial artist with the faceless mask. They went up. All 3 of them went up. The crowd exclaimed. It was strange that 3 people went up to the 10th level at the same time. Nie Tian felt the murderous aura coming from the faceless man next to him. However, the woman ignored him completely. Her eyes were fixed on Rainy Thousand Leaves, who was on the Rising Dragon platform. "He knows Rui Chinyu?" Nie Tian was confused, but he didn't have time to think. He continued to climb. He was currently on the 10th level of the Rising Dragon platform, and he could feel the pressure. The moment he leaped onto the platform, he was shocked by the energy that came from all directions. It was understandable that Tang 13 was able to make it to the 10th level. However, the faceless man next to her had also made it to the 10th level. What's more, he was slightly slower than Ye Tian and Tang 13. His talent was terrifying. "Go!" Ye Tian and Tang 13 looked at each other. Without hesitation, they leaped into the air again. Under the watchful eyes of countless pairs of eyes, the 3 figures leaped into the air at the same time. Then, they leaped into the air again and landed again. The 3 of them were like 3 gods. At this moment, they were the kings, the dominators. Chapter 462. The 3 of them stepped onto the Rising Dragon platform at the same time, causing the Rising Dragon pillar to spew out 3 5-colored cyclones. Yet Tian and the others dodged the cyclone's attack, but their expressions became even more nervous. The 2 dragons just now had manifested from one of these cyclones. Everyone came to a realization. Every time someone stepped onto the Rising Dragon platform, the Rising Dragonstone pillar would manifest a divine dragon. "Are you guys all right?" Nie Tian ignored the 3 cyclones and went to Rui Chinyu and Gu Wuyo. The Crimson Soul Red Lotus behind Gu Wuyo had already disappeared. Her face was pale, and it was obvious that she had reached her limit. Although she was covered in blood, she was not injured. But Rui Chinyu was different. She had forcefully opened her 9-colored pupils, and she had even opened both pupils at the same time, triggering the backlash of the blood devourer in her body. Her life was in danger. "I'm fine." Rui Chinyu shook her head slightly. but her pale face and the blood seeping out of her eyes betrayed her. Master, the blood devour in her body has reached its most violent state. Without the dragon blood to suppress it, her life will be in danger, Corpse Lord reminded. What about the dragon blood? Nyetian asked solemnly. Rui Chinyu shook her head. The dragon blood had been used up. When she left Heaven Luo City, Nyetian gave her a big bottle of dragon blood, but it had been used up. Nyetian frowned. He remembered that the dragon blood he gave Rui Chinyu could last for about a month, but it had been used up in less than a month. Perhaps Rui Chinyu was cultivating some terrifying martial art. Nyetian sensed a strange aura from her. It seemed to be a very complicated elemental aura. Corpse Lord, do you have a way to help her suppress the blood devour? Nyetian asked anxiously. No. Corpse Lord shook his head and said, I'm too weak now. I can't devour the blood devour. Nyetian glanced at the small body of the corpse demon monarch and fell silent. If the corpse demon monarch were to forcefully devour the power of the blood devour, he might not be able to withstand it and might even die. Even though Corpse Luo was now Nyetian's blood contract slave, he couldn't ask him to die. I can save her. At that moment, the mysterious faceless man suddenly spoke. His voice was absolutely cold, as though it did not contain any emotions. Why should I believe you? Nyetian looked at him, frowning in thought. You don't have a choice. The faceless man's eyes were like a cold pond, bottomless. Even Nyetian couldn't see through them. I believe in him. Suddenly, Rui Chinyu looked at the faceless man. There was a slight ripple on her icy face. It was a slight tremble with a hint of excitement. Nyetian was confused. Did this faceless man really know Rui Chinyu? Since the faceless man was able to step onto the Rising Dragon arena so easily, he should not be an ordinary person. But did he really have the ability to save Rui Chinyu? The power of the 9-colored eyes blood devour was something that even the corpse demon monarch was helpless against. Seeing that Nyetian was still hesitating, the faceless man spoke again. In this world, the only person I won't hurt is her, Rui Chinyu. You know my name? Rui Chinyu's cold face showed surprise. She did not know this faceless man at all, but he gave her an inexplicable sense of familiarity and natural sense of trust. Her instincts told her that the person in front of her would not hurt her. Nyetian stared at the faceless man, but the latter's eyes were like the ocean, bottomless. Even Nyetian couldn't see what was hidden behind those eyes. I'm not your enemy, at least not now. The faceless man spoke calmly, but there was a hint of anxiety in his indifference. Fine. Nyetian finally gave in. Rui Chinyu was already in danger. He had no other choice. I'll leave these things to you. After saying that, the faceless man walked forward and gestured for Rui Chinyu to sit down. The two of them sat cross-legged, and the faceless man began to burn all the blood in his body, slowly transferring it into Rui Chinyu's body. They're blood relatives. Seeing this, Nyetian suddenly realized that the faceless man and Rui Chinyu were blood relatives. A martial artist's blood represented the martial artist's life force, and there were bloodline restrictions in the blood, so they could not be merged with each other unless they were blood relatives, such as father and son, mother and daughter, brother and sister. Could he be Rui Chinyu's brother? Nyetian was shocked and made a guess. Although he could not see the faceless man's face, Nyetian could sense that the faceless man should be around 25 years old, slightly older than Rui Chinyu. At this age, he could only be Rui Chinyu's brother. However, Nyetian had never heard that Rui Chinyu had a brother. From what Elderly had told him about Rui Chinyu, Nyetian knew that Rui Chinyu was from the Bloody Slaughter Palace, and she was the Bloody Slaughter Palace's holy maiden. Elderly had said that the Bloody Slaughter Palace had been annihilated in a single night. Other than him, the three Lei brothers, and Ruo Yu and Xinya, who were not at the Bloody Slaughter Palace at that time, no one else had survived. Could there be other survivors from the Bloody Slaughter Palace, and this faceless man is one of them? Nyetian had thousands of questions in his mind, but the situation was critical, so it was not the time to think about it seriously. Tang 13, protect them. Leave these 5 little dragons to me." Nietion growled and stepped forward. His body was as steady as a mountain, blocking the 5 divine dragons from approaching Rui Qinyu and the others. Each of the 5 divine dragons was hundreds of meters long. Nietion's figure seemed small in front of them, but he had the aura of one man holding the pass against 10,000 enemies. The divine dragons that came out of the rising dragonstone pillar were very strange, and any injury could be healed in the blink of an eye. The 2 divine dragons that were seriously injured by Rui Qinyu and Gu Wuyo had already fully recovered. The strength of these headless divine dragons should be strong when the enemy is strong, and weak when the enemy is weak. If they really unleash the power of the divine dragons, there's no way I can fight them. Nietion could feel the surging dragon energy from the 5 divine dragons, and the corner of his mouth curled up strangely. He had already realized that the strength of the divine dragons was the same as the strength of their opponents. The stronger the opponent, the stronger the divine dragons. The weaker the opponent, the weaker the divine dragons. Rui Qinyu and Gu Wuyo used the rainbow pupils and crimson soul red lotus. Not only did they not hurt the divine dragons, but they also stimulated the latter's strength. The Rage of the Rising Dragon was actually a test of the Rising Dragon platform. If the person on the platform was a spirit wheel stage expert, the strength of the dragon would definitely be stronger. If it was an elemental pulse stage warrior, the strength of the dragon would be very weak. Nietion's strength was only at the 4th rank of the giant soul stage. Standing in front of the 5 divine dragons was equivalent to greatly weakening their strength. The 5 divine dragons roared at the sky, but they could feel a surge of power from Nietion. Their eyes were filled with deep fear and respect for the king. Seeing this, Nietion was puzzled. Even if he was strong, he was not strong enough to make the divine dragons fear him. Dragon scale energy. In the next moment, Nietion immediately figured out the reason. It must be the dragon scale energy in his body. Chapter 463. Roar. A divine dragon let out an angry roar. As if it was testing the waters, its huge body came crashing down, and its steel-like dragon claws came down from the sky. It seemed to have the power to tear through everything. Instantly, the dragon chi spread out like a tidal wave, causing Nietion to feel an irresistible force. Nietion took a few steps back and calmed his mind. The absolute heaven slash appeared in his hand as he roared, "Reckless beast, since you're courting death, I'll slay the dragon today." Slay the dragon. As soon as the last 2 words fell, Nietion's aura surged. The yuan meridians in his body revolved crazily, and waves of yuan force gushed out. In just an instant, his aura rose to a terrifying level. Climbing the rising dragon platform had almost depleted Nietion's yuan force, but the moment he stepped onto the platform, all his yuan force returned. This should be a mysterious mechanism of the rising dragon platform. Otherwise, even if a martial artist stepped onto the rising dragon platform, without yuan force, they would not be able to fight against the divine dragon. He was currently in the 4th layer of the giant spirit realm, and his body had awakened 12 million astral energy. Even without using astral souls, he could barely fight against a 1st layer true energy realm martial artist. Sky-piercing sword. The battle prowess that exceeded his own strength excited Nietion. With a roar, he struck out with his sword. Instantly, sword chi overflowed, and 100-meter-long sword shadow appeared, slamming towards the divine dragon with great force. The murderous sword chi surged out, and waves of aura wrapped around the 100-meter-long divine dragon like the tentacles of the Grim Reaper. Kill! Nietion spat out a cold voice. The sword shadow fell, and a white ray of light struck the largest scale on the divine dragon's chest. With a loud crash, the giant scale was smashed off by the powerful impact. Immediately, the terrifying sword chi surged out like a wild beast, and in an instant, the scales on the divine dragon's body were peeled off piece by piece. Then, the flesh and blood of the divine dragon split open, inch by inch. Whoa! The divine dragon let out a tragic cry, and the surging dragon chi had an additional hint of sorrow. Why? The terrifying sword shadow fell mercilessly. With a loud bang, a deep gash appeared on the rising dragon platform, and the divine dragon was directly cut in half by Nietion's sword. Hiss! Seeing this scene, everyone gasped and couldn't believe their eyes. Nietion was only at the 4th level of the giant spirit state, and that divine dragon was not even afraid of the Scarlet Soul Red Lotus and the Rainbow Pupils, but it was actually killed by his sword. Nietion's battle prowess was terrifying. Of course, there were also people who saw through the truth. Yao Fei put away his shocked expression and said, "The mystical dragons on the rising dragon platform adjust their combat prowess according to the strength of their opponents. If Nietion is weak, the mystical dragons will be weakened as well. However, his true combat prowess far exceeds that of warriors of the same level. I think even the rising dragon platform did not realize this." Master Yao. At the side, Gu Qiulong nodded slightly, then shook his head and said, "The rising dragon platform tests a warrior's talent. I think the person who set up the array formation was looking for a warrior like Nietion City Lord, who is weak but strong. Only someone like that can be considered a true super genius." Yao Fei was slightly taken aback, then nodded solemnly. Nietion was overjoyed to see that the divine dragon was killed with a single slash and could no longer recover. Yao Fei and Gu Qiulong only saw the first point, but not the second. Nietion was able to kill the dragon with a single slash not only because the divine dragon was weak, but more importantly, he knew the divine dragon clan's weakness, the heart-protecting dragon scale. The divine dragon clan was a terrifying existence that surpassed rank 9 spiritual beasts. The dragon energy in their bodies made them almost immortal. Even with heaven-defying items like the 9-colored pupils and crimson soul red lotus, they could recover in an instant. However, the dragon heart in the chest of the divine dragon clan was a fatal weakness. It was where all the dragon energy and blood essence in the body gathered. Once it was destroyed, it would affect the rest of the body. Not only would the dragon be unable to recover, but the dragon body would also be destroyed. Even the dragon soul would disappear. Hence, the dragon scale of the divine dragon clan was the hardest part of the scales on the body. It was known as the dragon's reverse scale. Nietion was aware of this weakness of the divine dragon clan. That was why he had first broken the dragon scale, then heavily injured the dragon heart. Only then could he kill the divine dragon with a single slash. If he had not known this, Nietion would not have been able to kill the divine dragon before him, even if he died of exhaustion. Good stuff. Nietion took a step forward and reached out to catch the dragon scale. Unfortunately, before his hand could warm up, the dragon scale turned into a ball of light and disappeared. Nietion was too naive this time. The divine dragon in front of him was a manifestation of the stone pillar of the rising dragon. It had no physical body. The dragon scale was, of course, fake. Almost at the same time, the divine dragon's corpse on the ground also turned into a ball of light and disappeared. Tang 13 and the others behind Nietion were shocked speechless when they saw him kill a divine dragon with a single slash. They knew that Nietion was strong, but they did not expect him to be this strong. Then, in for a penny, in for a pound, Nietion rapidly slashed out with his sword and killed the other 4 divine dragons. The crowd was so shocked by his feat that they were all expressionless. Was this guy a human or a ghost? He was a dragon-slaying executioner. Just as Nietion killed the last divine dragon, the spinning stone pillar of the rising dragon suddenly stopped. Then, the voice boomed again. The human emperor slays the dragon. The Lord of the 9 stars of the divine dragon has appeared. The dragon vein of the 9 stars has recognized its owner. As a majestic voice rang out, everyone's hearts shuddered. At this moment, their souls felt a sense of awe, and their eyes went blank. Looking at the young man holding the long sword on the rising dragon arena, they could vaguely see a supreme emperor standing proudly between the heavens and earth, as tall as a mountain. The human emperor slays the dragon. Nietion was stunned at first. Then his face stiffened. The human emperor is me? Kaboom! Just as he was in shock, the entire rising dragon platform shook violently. It was on the verge of collapsing. Let's leave. The faceless man seemed to have sensed something. He shouted and leaped off the platform with Rui Chinyu. Tang 13 glanced at Nye Tian. The latter nodded. Without hesitation, he leaped off the rising dragon platform with Gu Wuyo. Only Nye Tian was left on the rising dragon platform. There was no trace of fear on his face. Instead, he was excited. His instincts told him that something earth-shattering was about to happen. Kaboom! Another loud rumble. It was as if a powerful force had emerged from underground. The rising dragon platform could no longer withstand it, and the giant steps began to crumble. Rocks flew everywhere, and dust filled the air. In an instant, heaven and earth shook, and the color of the sky changed. Nye Tian stood among the rubble. He ignored everything around him and stared at the ball of array light on the stone pillar of the rising dragon. Dragon Vein of the 9 stars, recognize its owner. At that moment, the voice boomed. The stone pillar of the rising dragon shuddered and crumbled. The 5-colored ball of light on the stone pillar released an irresistible force that sucked Nye Tian in. Chapter 464. The moment his mind stabilized, Nye Tian felt the soles of his feet become empty, and he began to fall instantly. Nye Tian felt that he was in a secret, enclosed space. The wind whistled past his ears, but there was a dazzling, colorful light in front of him. The moment he felt something huge swimming above his head. He looked up, and his expression instantly froze. Above his head, there were actually 9 golden dragons, each of which was thousands of meters long, wandering in the sky. Above the 9 heavens, countless thunderbolts struck down, connecting to form a sea of thunderbolts. The 9 golden dragons were connected head to tail, as if they had formed some kind of mysterious formation, blocking the thunderbolts from falling. At this time, the speed at which Nye Tian fell became faster and faster, as if he was falling into a bottomless abyss. In the space below, there was a scorching wave of air whistling over. Nye Tian saw that his body was being peeled off by this scorching wave of air, and his skin was peeling off bit by bit. The strange thing was that there was not a single trace of blood. Then his flesh was melted, and his drenched white bones were exposed, slowly becoming charred black, and slowly turning into ashes. Damn! Nye Tian was scared out of his wits by the changes in his body. He gradually could not feel the existence of his body, as if only his soul was wandering in the void. This was a very strange feeling, as if he had become one with everything around him, and there was no distinction between them. Just when Nye Tian felt that his body had completely disappeared, the speed at which he was falling suddenly slowed down and finally stopped. At this time, Nye Tian was in a whole new world, and the world in front of him completely stunned him. There was colorful light flowing in all directions, and the gentle and gorgeous lines of light occupied the entire space. Such a scene was dazzlingly beautiful, so beautiful that it could move one's soul, so beautiful that it could frighten one's soul, so beautiful that it should not exist. At this time, Nye Tian felt that he had become one with the world in front of him, and with a thought, he could go to any corner of this space. What is this place? After a long time, Nye Tian calmed down, but he still could not feel the existence of his body. He could not help but mutter to himself. There was no sound around him, and even the sound of the wind had disappeared. Nye Tian looked down and suddenly discovered a colorful ball of light. It was very similar to the 5-colored ball of light on the rising dragonstone pillar, but it was thousands of times larger. As the multicolored ball of light rotated, a 7-colored radiance was slowly released, forming rays of light that circulated in the air. What is this ball of light? Could it be a sun? Nye Tian murmured. The shock in his heart was written all over his face. At this time, the sea of lightning above their heads disappeared, and the 9-headed golden dragon slowly came to the side of the colorful ball of light. The 9-headed dragon's body slowly entered the ball of light. The body that entered the ball of light turned into rays of light and fused with the ball of light. These golden colossal dragons are actually sacrificing themselves by fusing all their dragon chi and blood essence into that sphere of light. Nietian was even more surprised when he saw that. A moment later, the 9 giant dragons disappeared, and 9 dazzling white rays appeared above the huge ball of light. 9-star dragon vein. Nietian was at a loss for words. He did not know why he knew that the 9 rays of white light were the 9-star dragon vein. Whoosh! At this time, an invisible power suddenly surged out of the huge ball of light. Nietian felt his soul instantly appear in the center of the ball of light. 9-star dragon vein master, dragon vein refinement. The rumbling voice sounded again, solemn and holy. Nietian was in the center of the ball of light, and he could feel the immense power tearing at his soul. That pain was something that he would remember for the rest of his life. Then, a strange scene appeared. The ball of light continuously released mysterious power, which transformed into balls of light that struck the soul in the center of the ball of light. Slowly, the nerves, blood vessels, tissues, bones, and skin appeared layer by layer. It was as if a master sketcher was drawing, and a human figure gradually appeared. When the face of the human figure was drawn, it was strangely familiar. It was Nietian. Nietian felt as if he had been reborn after his body had been destroyed. He felt as if he had been reborn. His strength was on the verge of exploding, and he was like a divine dragon that had broken out of the abyss. His soaring aura made him look down upon heaven and earth. In the next moment, before Nietian could think, he felt his body turn into a black hole, and the ball of light that enveloped him began to collapse. In the blink of an eye, the entire ball of light entered Nietian's body and disappeared completely, as if it had never been there. In the next second, the illusion around Nietian changed. In front of him was the collapsed, rising dragon platform, and the flying rubble whistled past his ears. Nietian was stunned for a long time, and he finally reacted. He looked up, and the ball of light on the rising dragonstone pillar had disappeared. Everything that had just happened, his body being destroyed and then reborn, was like a dream. However, logic told Nietian that it was definitely not a dream, because he could feel that his body was different from before. As for what exactly was different, he was not sure. The Lord of the 9 stars of the Divine Dragon, the 9 stars of the Dragon Vein, what did the rising dragon platform leave in my body? Nietian was extremely confused, but now was not the time for him to think about it. Nietian looked into his soul dimension. Everything was normal in the chaotic original coffin, as if nothing had happened. He felt much more at ease. The colorful ball of light disappeared, and so did the rising dragon formation. Most of the martial artists had left the rising dragon platform. Nietian saw that the faceless man was still transferring blood chi to Rui Chinyu not far away, and he quickly flew over. "Mr. Nya, are you all right?" Elder Yi saw that Nietian's expression was a little strange, and he could not help but ask. "I'm fine." Nietian nodded and looked at the faceless man. The faceless man burned his own blood chi and merged it into Rui Chinyu's body. Nietian found that the faceless man's blood chi was very strange, and it was several times more vigorous than an ordinary person's. "Corpse Luo, this guy." Nietian frowned slightly, as if he had thought of something, but he was not sure. He asked Corpse Luo Demon Lord in the chaotic original coffin for confirmation. "Master." Corpse Luo Demon Lord's voice was trembling. This guy has the legendary 9-yang body. It really is the 9-yang body. No wonder his blood chi is so much more vigorous than ordinary people." Nietian took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He did not expect that the faceless man in front of him, who was related to Rui Chinyu by blood, was the legendary 9-yang body. The 9-yang body was a very rare heaven rank advanced spirit body, and it was even more terrifying than Zhang Xiaoyi's Battle Cloud Tyrant body. Chapter 465. Hearing Corpse Demon Lord's words, Nietian's expression changed slightly as he looked at the mysterious, faceless man. No wonder his blood chi was so overbearing and even more terrifying than pure dragon blood. It was able to suppress the blood power in Rui Chinyu's body. It turned out to be the blood chi of 9-yang. The body of 9-yang was the strongest yang spiritual body in the world. Therefore, the blood chi in the faceless man's body was the blood chi of nine yang, which had a natural restraining effect on the blood power. The faceless man should have known this long ago. Otherwise, he would not have been so confident in injecting blood chi into Rui Qinyu. Is this guy really Rui Qinyu's brother? Nie Tian was puzzled. It had to be said that the faceless man was also very powerful. He was only 25 or 26 years old, but he was already in the ninth tier of the primordial element. Coupled with his body of nine yang, Nie Tian estimated that this man's real combat strength was no weaker than a warrior in the first tier of the divine wheel. Just now, this guy easily stepped onto the rising dragon platform. There was no doubt that his martial arts talent was unquestionable. There is no doubt that this person's martial arts achievements in the future would be limitless. A moment later, Rainy Thousand Leaves' pale face gradually recovered, and some color returned to her face. However, this time, the faceless man did not stop. The blood chi in his body gushed out even more wildly. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment and said in a deep voice, "What are you doing? If you continue to burn the blood chi in your body, you will die." The faceless man had already burned too much blood chi. Even if he had the body of nine yang, his life would be in danger if he continued. However, the faceless man ignored Nie Tian's words and continued to burn his blood chi. The air was filled with blood chi, and a scorching wave of air spread out like a scorching sun. Everyone felt the heat and backed away. "Master," Corpse Demon Lord spoke again. His small body stiffened and trembled. He is absorbing the blood power." Nie Tian probed with his divine sense and found that Rui Qinyu's body was constantly surging with black blood-devouring power, while the faceless man formed a nine-yang blood chi vortex in his body, madly absorbing the blood-devouring power. Nie Tian immediately understood that the faceless man was transferring the power of blood devour from Rui Qinyu to himself. This is an extremely dangerous method. If the nine-yang blood chi in his body is not strong enough, then he could be devoured by the blood-devouring power at any time. However, the faceless man had already begun to transfer the power of the blood drain. If he were to stop it now, both he and Rui Qinyu would be in danger. Nie Tian's expression was solemn. He thought to himself, "You risked your life for Rui Qinyu. You must be her closest relative." Faceless man was helping Rui Qinyu to transfer the malevolent blood energy. No one else could help but stand aside and watch. Nie Tian glanced at the ruins of the Rising Dragon Arena and began to observe the surroundings. At this time, he discovered that the surroundings were actually a boundless desert. Yellow sand billowed in the air, covering the sky and the sun. The sand dunes in the distance were like golden waves, rising and falling one after another, giving people a feeling that they were slowly surging. The surrounding cultivators were scattered around, carefully observing the surroundings. No one would have thought that the chaotic abyss was actually a desert. This time, if it wasn't for Nie Tian breaking the rising dragon killing array, everyone would have lost their lives here. "Gooden, did you come here the last time you entered the chaotic lands?" Although he knew that there was no hope, Nie Tian still asked. Gooden shook his head and said, "The last time I came here, it was a canyon, not a desert." Nie Tian sighed softly. He looked into the distance and suddenly noticed something. His expression slowly changed. At this time, Yao Fei came to Nie Tian and said in a low voice, "Nie Tian, City Lord." "I heard it." Nie Tian nodded solemnly. His expression was very ugly. He heard a dense, rustling sound coming from afar. It seemed to be coming from the ground, as if there was a huge creature moving at high speed underground. "Mr. Nie, what's wrong?" Elder Yi asked in a low voice. "There's something underground." Nie Tian's expression was solemn. He turned to look at the faceless man and Rui Qinyu. This was a crucial moment for the transfer of the blood devour power. No one could disturb them. Nie Tian had to ensure the safety of the two. After a while, the others also noticed that something was wrong. The ground seemed to be shaking. The deputy city lord of Chaos City, Wan Churong, came to Rui Qinyu's side and immediately understood what the faceless man was doing. She shouted to the three female disciples beside her, Protect Rui Chinyu. Yes. The three female disciples replied in unison. Everyone felt something was wrong and subconsciously gathered around. Everyone looked into the distance. The sand dunes there seemed to be pushed by a huge force. They were surging like waves, whistling in their direction. What on earth is that? Tian probed with his divine sense, wanting to sense what was underground. However, he discovered that there was a vibrating force coming from underground. The entire ground was almost cracked by this force. Could it be some kind of terrifying spirit beast? Although the environment here is not good, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is several times denser than the outside world. If it's a spirit beast, it must be terrifyingly powerful. Tian guessed in his heart. His expression became even more solemn. Everyone from a circle. Don't move. Tian yelled. There was a hint of panic in his voice. Everyone looked ahead with fear in their eyes. They subconsciously obeyed Tian's words and formed a circle. The powerful martial artist stood at the outermost, while the weaker ones stood in the middle. At this time, they had to work together because no one knew what kind of enemy they would face next. After a while, the sound from underground grew louder and louder, and soon turned into a roar. The sand waves in the distance were more than 10 meters high, and from afar, it looked like a collapsing wall of sand covering the sky and covering the earth. The earth began to shake violently. The shaking caused the sand to fly all over the sky. The sand flew on people's faces, making them unable to open their eyes. Everyone was ready to face the unknown enemy underground. Rumble. The ground shook even more violently. The surrounding ground rose high. It seemed that there was a huge thing moving from underground. It was going to break out of the sand at any time. They're coming. Be careful. Tian yelled. His heart was in his throat. Tian glanced over and was shocked to find that the moving sand dunes were endless. He couldn't see the end of them. It was hard to imagine how terrifying the thing under the ground was. Boom! Suddenly, the sand dunes rose high and then fell down in an instant. Bang, bang, bang. Before anyone could react, countless black shadows suddenly sprang out from the surrounding ground. They were like sharp arrows. The black shadows weren't too big. They were about 3 or 4 meters long. However, there were a lot of them. They were black, and there was a cracking sound. It was very strange. It's a snake. Seeing these black shadows clearly, everyone gasped. Chapter 466. There were many sand snakes. They were densely packed together, forming a sea of sand snakes. When they gathered together, they were dozens of meters tall. The sand snakes' tails were vibrating very quickly. The crackling sounds in the air were produced by their tails. Their earthy yellow eyes emitted a cold chill. When they looked at everyone, they shuddered. It was these sand snakes that were sneaking underground just now. Their bodies were not big, but there were too many of them. That was why the ground was shaking violently. There were too many sand snakes. They were sneaking underground, causing the entire sand dune to move. F*CK. What the F*CK is this? Why are there so many snakes all of a sudden? Everyone looked around and screamed. The sand snakes were black and dense, like a rolling wave. They could not see the end of it. The black sand snakes were squeezed together, flicking their scarlet tongues. The air was filled with the smell of blood and killing. However, these sand snakes did not attack immediately. They seemed to be testing something. Faceless Man and Rui Chinyu were still sitting cross-legged, as if they were ignoring the movements of the outside world. Elder Yi, protect the two of them. Tian looked back at the two and said in a low voice. Elder Yi did not ask about the relationship between Tian and Rui Chinyu. He just nodded. These sand snakes were not big. They were only 3 to 4 meters long and as thick as a baby's wrist. However, there were too many of them. When they attacked together, it was terrifying. Woo! At this moment, there was an intense sound of a horn in the distance. The invisible sound wave had a strange effect on the sand snakes. The next moment, all the sand snakes became agitated. Their tails vibrated even more violently. There was a crackling sound in the air, like a sharp explosion. Someone is controlling these sand snakes. Elder Yu was shocked, and could not help but shout. Netian also noticed the impact of the horn on the sand snakes. His expression became even more serious. To be able to control so many sand snakes at the same time, this person's strength was unimaginable. Whoosh! All of the sand snakes opened their mouths almost 180 degrees, revealing two barbed fangs. A gust of wind that smelled of blood assaulted the nostrils, and soon after, it came crashing down like a stormy sea. Everyone felt their hearts tremble, and then they didn't hesitate to launch attacks in succession. Bang! 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 Countless martial skills were released in an instant, bombarding the wall of sand snakes. Immediately, cracks appeared on the wall of sand snakes. Netian jumped into the air and looked around. Then he sucked in a breath of cold air. There were so many sand snakes that he couldn't even see the end of them. They covered an area that was dozens of kilometers in diameter. With so many sand snakes, their numbers were at least in the hundreds of millions. Night-toppling sword. Netian no longer hesitated. He chopped down with his sword, and a 100-meter-long sword image pressed down majestically. With a loud boom, a huge gap appeared in the group of sand snakes. One sand snake after another danced in midair and shot towards Netian like arrows that had just been shot from bowstrings. **T. This was Netian's first time making a move, and he immediately had a bad feeling. These sand snakes had extremely strong defensive power. Surprisingly, the sand snakes that he had struck didn't die. They only felt dizzy for a brief moment before recovering. The power of Netian's sword was something that even a 9th-level giant spirit martial artist would have a hard time withstanding. Yet, these sand snakes were unscathed. It was truly frightening. What was even more shocking was that the countless sand snakes leapt up, and on their backs, two thin wing-like things spread open. The wing-like things flapped rapidly, and their speed suddenly increased as they rapidly pounced over. 300 billion sword images. Netian saw that the situation wasn't right. He stabbed out with his sword, and countless sword images gushed out, clashing head-on with the sand snakes. Bang, bang, bang. Sounds of collisions came from beside him. Countless sand snakes were knocked unconscious and fell down. The situation below wasn't good either. Although everyone had blocked most of the sand snake's attacks, the sand snake wall was getting thicker and thicker. The martial artist's punches and palms landed on the wall, but the damage caused was getting smaller and smaller. With so many sand snakes gathered together, even a spirit wheel realm martial artist spirit wheel space would be suppressed. In the distance, layers of sand snakes were like waves. Each wave was higher than the one before, and they came crashing over majestically. **T. If we're surrounded by these sand snakes, it will be hard to escape. Netian immediately understood that the person controlling the sand snakes wanted to surround them and slowly nibble them away. Charge out. Someone realized that something was wrong and shouted. Netian looked down and saw that the person who shouted was Wu Mang. This guy was severely injured by the rising dragon formation, and he had already recovered. However, the physique of a spirit wheel realm martial artist was indeed strong. Kill! Wu Mang roared, and his eyes were completely red. A black spear appeared in his hand, and he struck out with it, forcefully breaking a big hole in the sand snake wall. Ha! Let's go. When Wu Mang saw that there was an additional path in front of him, he smiled sinisterly and was the first to rush in. The people behind Wu Mang were the people from the Alchemist Guild and the Danwu Hall. Diao Jingde was also among them. Idiot! Don't rush in recklessly. Netian roared and was about to curse. Wu Mang didn't know how many sand snakes were in front of him. He was simply courting death if he wanted to rush out just by opening a hole. The sand snakes were boundless, and he couldn't see the end of it. If he rushed in like this, it was no different from seeking his own death. Before he could rush out, he would die in the pile of sand snakes. Diao Jingde raised his head and looked at Netian, who was in midair. After a moment of consideration, he chose to believe in Netian's judgment and shouted at Wu Mang, "Commander Wu, come back quickly." Unfortunately, Wu Mang's figure had already rushed in. Under the noise of the sand snakes, he couldn't hear Diao Jingde's voice at all. The instant Wu Mang's figure rushed in, the sand snakes immediately blocked the hole, and his figure was completely submerged. Idiot! Nie Tian cursed and no longer cared about Wu Mang. His eyes looked at Faceless Man and Rui Qianyu. He had already thought of a countermeasure in his heart, but he had to wait for the two of them to transfer the power of the blood drain. Don't bother about him. Guard your positions, and don't let the sand snakes rush in. Nie Tian reminded everyone to calm down. This was a moment of life and death. If they were surrounded by the sand snakes, then they would really have no way to survive. Nie Tian raised his head and looked at the dense group of sand snakes in the distance. They were densely packed, causing the entire space to darken. He planned to break out from the air. There were too many sand snakes on the ground, and there was no possibility of rushing out. Everyone's essence energy had not been expended too much yet. If they delayed any longer, when their essence energy was almost depleted, then there would really be no hope. After a moment, Faceless Man and Rui Qianyu finally stood up. Humph! Finally done. Nie Tian sensed that the power of the blood drain in Rui Qianyu's body had already disappeared, and he couldn't help but let out a long breath of turbid air. The power of the blood drain shifted behind Faceless Man. He had the nine-yang physique. As long as he could withstand the first moment, it wouldn't take long for the nine-yang blood qi to completely eliminate the power of the blood drain. Chapter 467. Nie Tian gazed into the distance. All of a sudden, loud roars echoed out from the boundless swarm of sand snakes. Then, for silhouettes that looked like huge waves appeared, as if they were flood dragons that were swimming in the water. Boom! 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 In the next moment, 4 figures rose into the sky. The huge figures were hundreds of meters long. They were actually 4 giant sand snakes. It had the same appearance. It had a dark yellow body and was covered in rugged rocks. Its scales were like protruding rocks. It looked extremely hard and indestructible. On the head of the giant snake, there was a horn that was several meters long. It looked like a sharp crescent sword and was extremely intimidating. What was more terrifying was that there was a thin layer of wings on their backs, which extended from their head to their tail. It was very strange. Nie Tian could feel that the strength of these 4 giant sand vipers definitely surpassed rank 5 spirit beasts. They were at least equivalent to martial artists in the 5th tier of the true element realm, and their defensive abilities were definitely comparable to martial artists in the divine wheel realm. Spirit wheel realm warriors, open up the spirit wheel space. Everyone, break through from the sky. Nie Tian yelled. If these 4 giant sand vipers came over, it would be very troublesome. At this moment, it was a matter of life and death. Everyone had to work together. Otherwise, only death awaited them. Okay. Elder Yi nodded and was the first to respond to Nie Tian. He opened up the spirit wheel space and enveloped the surrounding warriors. The other spirit wheel realm warriors, Mo Feng, Qiu Wuhan, Tang Zhilong, the outer sanctum elder of the Tang family, Gu Zhuai, and the deputy city lord of Chaos City, Wan Shirong, glanced at Nie Tian in the sky. At this moment, they chose to believe in him. They opened up their spirit wheel spaces and connected them with Elder Ye's spirit wheel space. Previously at the Rising Dragon formation, Nie Tian had already proved himself. Not only did he step onto the Rising Dragon platform, but he even destroyed the Rising Dragon formation with one slaying dragon. Although his strength was far from being the strongest, his reaction in the face of danger was far superior to the others. All the warriors of the Spirit Wheel realm connected the Spirit Wheel space and enveloped the 200 warriors. Go! Nie Tian roared. Elder Yi and the others glanced at each other. Their silhouettes rose from the ground. More than 200 martial artists flew up at the same time. Everyone flew into the air and looked around. They were surrounded by endless sand snakes, and they couldn't see the end of them. They all sucked in a breath of cold air, and even their tailbones were cold. Mr. Nie, which way should we go? Elder Ye's expression turned serious as he asked Nie Tian. At this time, Nie Tian had already become the leader. His words represented absolute authority. Over there, Nie Tian pointed casually. Facing the endless sand snakes, he did not know which side was safe, so he could only try his luck. Elder Yi Mo Feng, and the other ancient martial art practitioners charged at the very front. The ancient martial art practitioners from 2 days ago hid in the divine will space and were relatively safe. However, the elemental energy of a spirit wheel realm warrior was limited. When the elemental energy ran out, the spirit will space would definitely not be able to be maintained. That would be terrible. Rumble. At this moment, the ground suddenly shook. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. They looked down and saw a badly mutilated figure scuttling out from the sand snakes. Commander Wu. Diaojingda's eyes widened when he saw the figure clearly. Nietian took a closer look. That bloody figure was really Wu Mang. This guy foolishly charged into the sand snakes just now, but now he was in an extremely sorry state. His elemental energy was almost depleted, and there was not a piece of intact skin on his body. He must have used his last breath to charge out. Come up. Mo Feng seemed to hesitate for a moment. Finally, he raised his hand and pulled Wu Mang up from the sand snakes and into the divine will space. Wu Mang's flesh and blood burst open. It was a tragic sight. Diaojingda quickly fed him a few elixirs. Whoosh! An ear-piercing whistling sound suddenly came. It was actually a giant sand viper chasing after them. In the midst of the yellow sand, the giant sand viper charged over. Its huge horn bombarded the divine wheel space. The invisible divine wheel barrier shook violently and was on the verge of collapse. If a divine wheel realm warrior only cared about himself, the divine wheel space would naturally be indestructible. However, now that he was carrying more than 200 other warriors, his defense was greatly reduced. We can't hold on anymore. We can't hold on any longer. Mo Feng shouted in panic. You bunch of trash, hurry up and stop that big snake. Don't let it hit us again. Otherwise, everyone will die. Qiu Wuheng also shouted. When everyone saw the 100-meter-long body of the giant sand viper, they all gasped. No one dared to go out. Warriors of the true energy realm, come out with me. Let's kill this beast. Nietian roared. He was the first to come out of the divine wheel space. The proud sword wings appeared on his back, and the long sword in his hand flashed. He was fearless. Qiu Wuheng was right. If the giant sand viper was allowed to ram into the divine will space, once the space was broken, everyone would die. Even Wu Mang was in such a miserable state because of the giant sand viper, not to mention the others. Warriors of the giant spirit realm couldn't fly. Therefore, only warriors of the true energy realm could come out to stop the giant sand viper. How? The giant sand viper suddenly saw someone blocking in front of it. It immediately let out a low roar and rolled over. Its huge horn pounced at Nietian. Nietian didn't reply. He held his sword with both hands and slashed down. 100-meter-long sword radiance appeared, but it was directly smashed by the giant sand viper. Nietian was also sent flying, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. What a strong force! The giant sand viper was too strong. Nietian's sword did not cause any damage to it at all. When the other warriors saw that Nietian was beaten to the point where he spat out blood, they were all terrified. They were all hesitating whether they should go out or not. Boss Nietian, I'm coming. Gooden was the first to jump out. He used his true energy to float in the air. However, at this moment, another 2 giant sand vipers arrived. Their huge bodies rolled up a powerful aura as they charged at them. Between Nietian and Gooden, one with a sword and the other with a fist, they were both pushed back by the giant sand viper. The 2 of them stood still. Their chests were roiling, and they couldn't control themselves. They spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. This time, they had collided with the giant sand viper head-on, and both of them had suffered heavy injuries. Do I have to use my star soul? Nietian frowned. He looked at the indifferent crowd below, and his eyes were filled with disappointment. It was already a matter of life and death, but everyone was still thinking about themselves. It was infuriating. Nietian, At this moment, a voice sounded. It was Rui Qinyu. However, as soon as she opened her mouth, blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. The blood devour power in her body had just been transferred away, so she was extremely weak now. She had no combat strength at all. At this moment, are you still thinking about yourself? Nietion wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and laughed coldly. His eyes were filled with extreme disdain. Elder Yi saw that Nietion was injured, but the crowd was still indifferent. He couldn't help but roar angrily. "You bunch of cowards. Nietion has already saved you once in the Rising Dragon Kill formation. Do you still want him to save you now? He is only in the 4th tier of the Giant Spirit Realm, but he is already fearless. You martial artists who are in the 5th tier of the True Energy Realm and above are hiding in the Godwill space like turtles. What are you afraid of? What a bunch of King cowards." Elder Yi had to keep the Godwill space open. Otherwise, he would have been the first to rush forward. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone's expressions turned ugly. At this moment, any martial artist with a bit of courage should stand out. "Nietion City Lord, I'm here to help you." At this moment, a figure finally jumped out. It was the Spirit Formation Master, Yao Feek. Chapter 468. Nietion City Lord is not a true Origin Realm martial artist. If he is not afraid, what should we be afraid of? Someone's blood was ignited. With a roar, he leaped out. "Damn it, it's just a few small snakes. Why should we be afraid of them?" Everyone's blood was boiling as they leaped out of the Divine Wheel space. At this moment, there were more than 200 martial artists, including 40 to 50 true Origin Realm martial artists. They rushed out together aggressively, forcing the 3 giant sand vipers to retreat. Phew, thank goodness. Nietion exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He did not want to use his star souls unless it was absolutely necessary. Moreover, he knew that the giant sand viper was not the most terrifying enemy. There were even more terrifying opponents hiding in the dark. Although he did not know who was controlling these giant sand vipers and giant sand vipers, Nietion could guess that the person hiding behind them must be a strong master. At this moment, Nietion suddenly realized that the injuries on his body had unknowingly healed. The bloody wound on his chest had healed in the blink of an eye. It was really strange. Could it be the dragon vein tempering from before? Nietion recalled that when he was at the Rising Dragon platform, he had entered a mysterious space. His body had disappeared and been reconstructed. At that time, he had heard a voice saying, 9-star Dragon Vein Master, Dragon Vein Tempering. Dragon Vein Tempering? Could it be that my body is like the divine dragon body and can instantly recover from injuries? A bold guess flashed through his mind. Nietion was shocked. However, after he calmed down and thought about it carefully, he confirmed this guess in his heart. When I was in that mysterious space, my body disappeared. Then, the light ball and the 9-star dragon vein formed by the 9-headed golden dragon tempered my body again. Now, my body is already a 9-star dragon vein body. Nietion understood everything and almost burst out laughing. The 9-star dragon vein body was probably not much weaker than the divine dragon body. Nietion felt that the 9-star dragon vein body had just been forged, and its true power had not been unleashed yet. There should be a huge hidden potential waiting for him to discover. Forcing himself to calm down, Nietion suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and focused his attention on the battle before him. At this moment, another 3 giant sand vipers appeared. They wanted to attack the Divine Wheel space, but they were blocked by the crowd. Although the giant sand vipers were ferocious, there were too many cultivators. They held an absolute advantage. The 6 snakes were all covered in blood. Their expressions were ferocious, but they still did not give up. "Bastard, why are you still not retreating?" Yao Feek roared angrily and struck out with his palm. The rolling palm energy condensed into a ray of white light. With a swoosh, it directly cut off the single horn of a giant sand viper. Woo! In pain, the giant sand viper let out a low growl. However, it became even more violent and charged at Yao Feek. "You're courting death." Countless voices sounded out as several true element level 5th LV martial artists attacked together. Bang! 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 After a flurry of attacks, several horrifying bloody holes appeared on the giant sand viper's body. Blood immediately gushed out, and the stench of blood filled the air for hundreds of meters. The giant sand viper's vitality was extremely strong. After rolling a few times in the air, Its huge body was dyed red with blood. After a long time, it finally stopped rolling and fell into the group of sand vipers below. When the other giant sand vipers saw that their companions had been killed, their eyes flashed with violence. They let out low growls and attacked at the same time, as if they had gone mad. "Kill these beasts!" All the warriors shouted angrily. Countless shadows of palms and fists appeared in the air, smashing towards the giant sand viper like dense raindrops. Bang! 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 When the attacks landed, the scales on the giant sand viper's body rolled up and blood dripped down. It was a horrifying scene. At this moment, the group of sand vipers below also attacked. They were like sharp arrows, charging towards the crowd in a suicidal manner. Pitter-patter! A crisp sound rang out like raindrops falling. Everyone was forced to retreat by the group of sand vipers. These small sand vipers were too troublesome. There were too many of them, and they were too fast. Everyone had to activate their entire body's defense, which consumed a lot of origin energy. At this moment, a giant sand viper suddenly attacked. Bang! Its huge horn directly hit a warrior who was busy dealing with the sand vipers and sent him flying. He died on the spot. Huh? Yet Tion's face darkened. He could tell that these sand vipers and giant sand vipers were fighting in coordination, so there must be someone controlling them from behind. Yet Tion flashed to Yao Feek's side and said in a low voice, "Master Yao, kill these giant sand vipers as soon as possible. There are more dangerous enemies waiting for us." Okay. Yao Feek nodded. He had also noticed that someone was secretly controlling the giant sand viper's attacks. 3,000 weak water. A feminine shout rang out. Immediately, a ball of turbid liquid turned into a large net, directly trapping 5 giant sand vipers. "This is my chance." Tion saw that this was a golden opportunity. He roared and took the lead, slashing down with his sword. Sword chi surged out, and the shadow of the sword shocked the sky as it fell down. Boom! However, this sword strike hit the weak water net, and all the attack power was absorbed by the ball of liquid. Huh? Tion frowned and looked at Tawny. She was the one who had used the water net to control the giant sand vipers. The giant sand viper's defense had clearly decreased in the water net, but it could still withstand Tion's full-powered sword strike. It was obviously Tawny's doing. Tion, City Lord, this strike is not enough. Another strike. Tawny's teasing voice sounded, but she was secretly laughing. I finally absorbed some of his power. Unfortunately, it's still a little short to open the eye of the Scar of Dusk. State Preceptor actually absorbed my power? Tion frowned, his eyes filled with anger and confusion. Lend me some more power, and I'll help you kill this little snake. Tawny smiled calmly, tempting Tion to attack again. Okay. Tion's blood was stimulated, and he slashed again. The sword's shadow was even bigger, but it was absorbed by Tawny's 3,000 weak water. What a strange primordial spirit. Tion hastily retreated. Looking at Hu Xiaoli, his expression changed slightly. He was not stupid, and he was not going to fall for Tawny's trick. He attacked again because he wanted to see how scary his opponent's spirit was. He was surprised. Tawny's spirit should be a spirit, and it had a devouring element. It could even devour his sword air, which was too weird. Tion didn't know what Hu Xiaoli wanted to do by absorbing his power, but he vaguely guessed that the latter should be brewing some big scheme. Since Hu Xiaoli was interested in Gu Wuyo's Scarlet Soul Red Lotus, it meant that she was also a member of the Devil Realm's Red Lotus clan. As a demon, it was strange that she was willing to be a preceptor of the Great Chu Empire. Weak water extreme kill. Tawny giggled. She waved her arm, and a sword made of weak water broke through the air. It pierced the giant sand viper from head to tail. Chapter 469. What a terrifying power! Seeing this scene, Tion was shocked. Not only was Little Li strong, but her methods were also cruel. She had directly blasted the giant sand viper into nothingness. On the other side, the other 4 giant sand vipers were also killed by the warriors. Their corpses fell into the group of snakes. Damn it, we finally killed them. Seeing the giant sand viper dead, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Everyone, Return to the divine wheel space. Nietion roared. He looked ahead and saw a forest at the end of the sand dune. He was delighted. As long as they entered the forest, they would be able to get rid of the snakes. Among the 40 true element warriors, a few died and a dozen were injured. The rest were fine. This kind of casualty was acceptable. We will be safe once we enter the forest. Seeing the forest in front of them, everyone was overjoyed. Elder Yi and the other Divine Wheel Realm warriors had been the Divine Wheel space for a long time. They were sweating profusely and could not hold on any longer. Just when everyone was about to return to the Divine Wheel space, a strange voice suddenly sounded. "You killed my baby viper, and you still want to escape?" A cold and stern voice sounded. A figure suddenly sprang out from the sand and leaped hundreds of meters into the air. With a hideous smile on his face, he looked down at everyone mercilessly. The moment they saw the figure clearly, everyone was shocked and asked, "What is this?" This figure was actually half human and half snake. The upper body was human, and the lower body was a snake's tail. It was covered in dark yellow armor and held a black snake spear in its hand. An expression of astonishment appeared on Nietion's face as he exclaimed, "Underground Nagas! And it is a snake man general." Corpse Demon Lord added, "Human warriors, how dare you trespass on my race's forbidden land? Die!" The Snake Man General shouted angrily. With a thrust of his spear, dark clouds rolled up in all directions, and a powerful aura came crashing down. Bang! The rolling dark clouds condensed into a giant palm and hit the invisible Divine Wheel barrier. With a muffled sound, the Divine Wheel space was directly broken. Too powerful. One hit, just one hit, and it directly broke the Divine Wheel space. Ah! Screams were heard. Many warriors fell into the group of snakes below. "Disperse!" The Naga General roared, and the sea of sand snakes on the ground receded like waves, burrowing into the ground and disappearing. The entire process happened in an instant, as if the sea of sand snakes had never appeared. Nietion looked at the Naga General and immediately knew that he was the one who had controlled the sand snakes and giant sand vipers to attack. Bang! 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 Then, countless figures broke out of the diagram. Hundreds of snake men appeared, holding black snake spears in their hands, surrounding all the martial artists. Nietion and the rest descended from the sky. All the warriors were surrounded by the serpent men. He discovered that each of these serpent men was actually at the true element realm. Dozens of them were even at the true element realm level 9. There were even a few who were at the spirit wheel realm. "Mr. Yao, can you tell how strong that Naga General is?" Nietion transmitted his voice to Yao Feek. Yao Feek nodded and replied, "He is at the 5th tier of the Divine Wheel." "The 5th tier of the Divine Wheel." Nietion gasped. With this level of strength, even if Elder Yi and the rest were tied together, they would still not be a match for him, unless he could help Elder Yi remove the demon sealing curse. The Naga General, Sha Qianlang, floated down from the sky. He looked at the human warriors in front of him with a sinister gaze. Everyone who met his gaze lowered their heads. A cold, murderous aura enveloped the crowd. Everyone revealed a look of fear, and they did not know what to do next. Sha Qianlang swept his gaze across the crowd and then looked at a young serpent man beside him. The latter was actually a female serpent man. She had delicate features and was much more beautiful than the average human girl. However, it was hard to say what her lower body was like. "Shana, can you tell? Who is the person that Her Majesty is looking for?" Sha Qianlang asked the woman beside him. The female serpent man named Shana kept sizing up the crowd. She swept her gaze across them one by one and then shook her head. Finally, her gaze landed on Nietion. Her vertical eyes lit up slightly and revealed a strange expression. She pointed at him and said, "General Qianlang, he is the master of the 9-star dragon vein." Nietion's heart sank slightly. He had vaguely sensed something just now. As expected, he had guessed correctly. These serpent men had come because the rising dragon kill formation had been destroyed. Just now, when Sha Qianlang said that Nietion and the rest had trespassed into their forbidden area, Nietion had already guessed that this forbidden area was most likely the rising dragon kill formation. At this moment, Nietian was really complaining incessantly. They had just entered the chaotic abyss and had already fallen into the rising dragon kill formation. They really did not want to trespass. Who the hell would be willing to trespass into a killing formation formed by the laws of heaven and earth for no reason? Shana, are you sure you didn't see wrongly? Sha Qianlong's gaze swept across Nietian. He pointed at Gu Qiulong, Qiu Xiaofeng, Faceless Man, Gu Wuyo, and the rest, and said, I think these people are more talented than that lad. It's impossible for him to have broken the rising dragon kill formation. Indeed, judging from their strength and age, Gu Qiulong and the rest were more powerful than Nietian. If the rising dragon kill formation was broken, it should be these people and not Nietian. General Qianlang, the spiritual serpent crystal that Her Majesty gave me shows that he is the master of the 9-star dragon vein. Shana pointed at Nietian. There was some suspicion in her eyes, but she obviously trusted the judgment of the spiritual serpent crystal more. Did you really break the rising dragon kill formation? Sha Qianlang nodded his head and sized up Nietian with his malicious eyes. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He didn't believe that a young lad with the strength of a level 4 giant soul could break the rising dragon kill formation. One must know that even their empress couldn't break the rising dragon kill formation. Could it be that this young lad's talent was even more terrifying than the serpent empress? I broke the rising dragon kill formation. I am the master of the 9-star dragon vein that you are looking for. Nietian took a step forward. There was no fear in his eyes. At this moment, it was impossible for him to deny it even if he wanted to. He might as well admit it. Good lad. Have some backbone. Sha Qianlang laughed coldly and shouted, Do you know that the rising dragon kill formation is a forbidden area of my tribe? The 9-star dragon vein is a sacred item of my tribe. Not only did you break into the forbidden area, but you also obtained the 9-star dragon vein. Do you believe that I will kill you now? Nietian raised his eyebrows and looked at Sha Qianlang. He said indifferently, I don't believe you. You don't believe me? Sha Qianlang was slightly stunned. He instantly realized that he had lost his composure. He asked why. Nietian smiled and said, You are only here to find me under the orders of the Serpent Empress. If you dare to kill me, you would have done it earlier. You wouldn't have to waste your time to find me. Since I'm already recognized as the 9-star Dragon Vein Master by the Rising Dragon platform, I'm sure I have a special meaning to the Naga tribe. I don't think the Serpent Empress will kill me, right? With these words, Nietian raised the corner of his eyebrows in a provocative manner. Sha Qianlang and Shana looked at each other and were stunned. They didn't expect a young lad to be so calm at this moment.